Good evening. Partially remotely, pursuant to the law signed by Governor Baker on June 16th, 2021, an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, which includes an extension until April 1st, 2022, of the remote meeting provisions of his March 12th, 2020 executive order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. This meeting will be recorded. I am looking for a roll call. Ms. Stout?
Present.
Ms. Tolley?
Present.
Ms. Games?
Present.
Ms. Rogers?
Present.
Ms. Scott?
Present.
Mr. Russell?
Present.
Ms. Seabrett Long?
Present.
And I am present. And we are beginning at 6:05 p.m. And I will turn it over to Mr. McMillan. You ready?
All right, yes, good evening, everybody. So I'm going to provide a presentation of the budget. So this is for the public hearing, but it does have figures that have updated since the last time I presented it to the school committee. In fact, it has, this is even updated than from, since the first set of slides we sent out, we've updated them. So there's a big red update, a graphic on the slide, and then that is repeated whatever numbers have been updated. However, it's not a, let's see if we can get this presented. All right. So this is updated because between sending these slides out on Monday and our meeting today, we had insurance figures, so the health insurance numbers were updated. So we had budgeted 6%, but they've come in at a 3% rate increase. And I will go through, I'll show you where that has impacted the figures. All right, so the 30,000 foot view. So this is the key takeaways for anybody who just wants one slide and then they're done. So the budget that we're presenting today, and this has been updated, this is a budget request of almost exactly 42.8 million. That is a 1.24 million increase on last year, which is just shy of 3%. So, as you know, we are at the moment looking at two different assessment methodologies. The original methodology that's in the regional agreement at the moment, and also a proposed methodology which does it in a slightly different way. So with the original method, that would be a 2.9% increase for Chatham and a 2.5% increase for Harwich. That's in their assessments. If we go with the new proposed methodology, it's a 10.8% increase for Chatham and less than 0.1% increase for Harwich. So I have COVID up here because obviously COVID is in everybody's minds, but it doesn't actually impact our budget in a really significant way, because where there is a financial impact, that has been mitigated by state and federal funding. So we're not seeing, this isn't a COVID budget, this doesn't have increases due to COVID. Enrollment is always a big factor here for us. Last year we saw a big decrease. This year we have not seen a decrease, and I think we're returning to the prior few years trend of kind of gentle trend downward. We are able to reduce one teacher at the Harwich Elementary School in grade 4 while maintaining class sizes, but we are requesting a new special education teacher, so that kind of is a net zero FTE change. And finally, there's no big new programs. There's no programs are being cut, and there are no programs planned, although we do want to continue investing in the programs that we already have in place, particularly the new ELA program at elementary schools. All right, so you can go home now, and you've got the main points.
All right.
The rest is all just detail. All right, so I just wanted to give a quick overview of how we put the budget together. And hopefully it should always start focused on our students. So our students should be front and foremost in our thinking as we're developing the budget, and should be informing all of our decisions. So all of our decisions on the budget should first and foremost think as to how it will impact students. And how that then manifests itself in practice is first the items in the expenditure. So the things that we plan to spend money on next year. Employee benefits, so that's salary and insurance. Our state assessments, so that's money when we have to give back for school choice and charter tuition. That's students who live in Harwich or Chatham but attend other public schools. Property insurance to insure our buildings. Debt service on the high school, the new high school construction debt. Our out-of-district tuition, that's for students who do attend our schools but who we send to specialised schools to provide their education. And other district priorities, and I'm going to go into some of these items in more depth in the coming slides. And again, these policies, which are these expenditures are influenced by our policies, particularly any legal requirements, our strategic plan, and again, that's where it should be tied back to students, our class sizes, what instructional support and operational support we need to deliver an education to those students. And then on the other side of the ledger, we have our revenue, which is also informing decisions. And this are kind of back and forth between what we want to spend money on and how much money we think we have coming in. So school, we receive money, and we're a net receiver. So we receive more money than we pay out for school choice, because we have more students coming into the district from other districts than we see leaving. Circuit breaker, which is reimbursement for certain special education costs. Grants. And obviously we're seeing a big grant this year in the form of the ESSER funding to help with COVID. Then we also have state aid, and we have, so the next group of revenue is the state aid and general fund revenue. And so that's Chapter 70, which is the state's primary a mechanism for funding public education. We have charter tuition. That's funds that the state provides to offset our cost of charter tuition. So when we have to send students out, or when students choose to go out and we have to pay for it, when they go to charter schools, we have to pay for that, but the state also then gives us a little money to lessen the blow of that cost to the district. And we get transportation aid because we're a regional district. We get transportation from the state, we get revenue from the state to help with our transportation. We receive Medicaid, which is funding for certain medical expenses, reimbursement for certain medical expenses, other local receipts like building use, excess and deficiency. So that's essentially money that we had left at the end of FY21. We can use a portion of that to offset next year's budget. And finally, the biggest part of our budget, our revenue, is town assessments. So that's how much money Harwich and Chatham pay towards funding our budget. And then just to come back again, just to re-emphasize that it's really all about the education of the students in the district. So I just wanted to put this budget increase in historical context. This budget increase would be higher. Last year we had a really low increase. We were very mindful of the financial uncertainty facing the towns, because we were doing that like in the midst of the COVID. So we had a very low budget, and prior to that it had been relatively low as well. So this would be higher than recent years, but if you take the average of increases since the start of the district, they're around 3%. So it's right there, maybe a little, it's actually maybe a little higher. The average is a little higher than we're asking for right now. So you have the school committee, and if anyone who's watching the last presentation will have seen this slide before. I don't love it as a presentation because there's a lot of words on there, but it really sums up exactly what's driven our budget request this year. And there's a little update sign there because this has changed. And the main way it's changed since the last iteration of these slides is that health insurance increase. So before we had based that was an increase of over $600,000 in health insurance costs, and that's now down to around $460,000. So it's still a big ticket increase in our budget, but not quite as big as we'd thought. So it's definitely going in the right direction. I would just say, so without getting into too much detail, I do think their health insurance we are part of the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group, and they are really well managed health insurance program, and that's allowed them to build up a bit of a fund balance, and some of that fund balance has been used to keep rate increases low. That won't last forever, so I do think next year or the year after we'll start to see increases of more than 3%. And so we just need to keep that in mind as we go into future year's budgets. But for this year, it's good because we are able to take some money off the top of the budget. We've mentioned retirement contributions. We saw a big increase in that this year. Our other budget priority requests, that number has gone up because we've used some of those health insurance savings to fund some additional budget requests. And I'll go through that when we get to that slide. So, in short, we saved roughly about $200,000 in health insurance. We used $100,000 of it to fund additional budget requests, and we reduced the overall budget by $100,000. Then the other items, property insurance increases. That's an ongoing issue for the district, an ongoing increase in costs and out-of-district tuition. We've also seen some sort of account lines which are going down in expected expenditure. School choice, so we're seeing fewer students leave the district through the school choice program, so that means we don't have to pay so much to those receiving districts. Likewise with charter tuition. Then we have like 20 odd year schedule of payments on the high school construction. Just the way they're structured, they go down each year. So it's not a saving or anything like that. We just have the amount of money we need to budget in that line just goes down a little bit each year. And then all the other changes. So there's we have around 500 account lines. So some of them are captured under there. The majority are not. All the other ones amount to a reduction of $122,000. As we put together the budget, the student enrollment is always a big factor in determining how we need to allocate our funds. So this slide has 5 lines. One is the grand total, the total enrollment for the district, and then the other 4, that's the green dotted one, and the other 4 are the enrollment for each school. The schools are plotted on the axis on the left, and the overall total is plotted to the axis on the right. But this is just to give you a sense of the trends. So overall, we have seen a gentle trend down. Meanwhile, the high school is going up because we know there's a bubble passing up through the high school. Harwich is going down but has kind of leveled off. The middle school is relatively level right now, and the Chatham Elementary School is is going down gradually. So, with those changes in enrollment, the district is able to maintain its class size objective. So at all levels, we will be within our goals of 19 plus or minus 2 students at the middle school and high school, and 18 plus or minus 1 at the elementary level. So when we talk about, and I've talked about in previous presentations, a level service, so we're continuing to provide the same level of service we provided this year and previous years as we go forward with this budget. This, again, I think the majority of people have already seen these slides, so I'll go quick. But these are other staffing changes. Don't have a big impact on the budget from where we are right now to next year, but they are just worth highlighting because it does change some of the allocation of funds and does change some of the supports for students. We've had to add special education instructional assistants in line with individualized education plans. Teacher position and a nursing position, which have been added, are being maintained. And we are reviewing support service positions to make sure they're properly allocated between the schools, and likewise with guidance and psychologist staffing to make sure we have the right staffing for the relative caseloads. So this is the budget priorities which are requested by principals and which are and directors, and which are included in the budget. So previously, like on Monday, the boxes on the left, so the staffing, the textbooks and other instructional materials and instructional supplies were already in the budget. Then we got the good news about the health insurance rates. We were able to move these other items, some staffing and some classroom furniture, into the budget. So they've now been added. So you'll see overall, we're really investing in textbooks and instructional materials. That's over $100,000 right there. And that's a large part of that is the ELA program at the elementary schools. So that's been a real priority that we've identified to help meet student needs, and so that's where we're investing our funds. We've also added as I mentioned before, a new special education teacher. So that's going to be offset by the reduction in the grade 4. So there's like a net zero change in FTE and full-time equivalent staffing. And that new special education teacher is there to help meet some of the needs we're seeing in the lower grades, like pre-K and kindergarten, as we're seeing a higher level of need, and we believe that's partly due to the impact of COVID stopping students from getting early intervention and receiving their needs being identified and met. So we're seeing more students arriving with more severe needs, so we want to provide that early support through an additional special education teacher. So other items I just want to quickly highlight because they were kind of things we discussed at the workshop and have since been added. The cameras for the photography course at the high school, so I was pleased we were able to include that because they're pretty critical for doing a camera course, is to have cameras, and the cameras we had were in need of replacement. They were older, they were older models, they didn't all work and so on. I'm pleased we're going to be able to do some work at the middle school around the dark room to get that renovated, some more furniture, and also the furniture that the Chatham Elementary School principal requested, talking about flexible furniture and ways to keep students engaged. That is now being funded. So I think that's really positive. So this is just a usual business slide. So the district invests almost $200,000 a year in leases for classroom technology, primarily Chromebooks, but this also includes laptops for teachers and Promethean boards and a computer labs here at the high school. So we've not added any more leases this year, but we're continuing to fund those leases. This is our capital plan. So in previous budget presentations, we kind of included all kind of capital improvement, and actually those technology leases were all included with capital. Strictly speaking, that's not capital. Capital is only items that have a unit price of over $5,000 or a project cost over $150,000. And so we've stripped everything else out. They're still a priority. They're part of like extraordinary maintenance capital improvement plan, but they're not our core capital plan. And I actually really like this because it helps focus on some of these big ticket items over the coming years. So roofs and boilers, you'll see those are, I mean, if you think, we actually don't do that many projects that have a higher than $150,000 one-off price. But what we do is things like roofs and boilers and vehicles. Those are the things that come up the most often. We have started the process for applying to the Massachusetts School Building Authority for funding for the roof projects here at the middle school and at Chatham Elementary School. So we also have on there a student passenger van, which we have applied to ESSER for. So it's on our capital list, but it's not part of the budget because it's coming out of our ESSER funds. And then I would say, so this is just an estimate of which years items will fall in. So it may be that items get brought in closer if we find that, the assessment from our vendor, for example, on the boiler is that it doesn't have as many years as we think, then we might bring things closer. Likewise, if things are singing and they're doing a really great job and we don't need to replace them, we'll push them out a little longer. We don't want to get to a point where things are breaking down, but we do want to get a maximum life out of our buildings and components. And that, like, for example, the field and track at the high school, We're not in any rush to replace that. If it's still going strong in 2029, we'll give it another couple of years, but we just know it's a big ticket item. We want it on our horizon. So yeah, so we're applying to the feasibility, we're applying to the Massachusetts School Building Authority for the Chatham and middle school roofs. The first part of that is you do a feasibility study. We did talk about that in my last presentation. That's where you start to do feasibility. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it does involve, doing a schematic design of the roof. You do an estimate of the total cost, and you start the procurement process. So it's really the first part of any project is going to include those elements. Once you've got through that process, you then have to get votes from school committees and from the towns before you can proceed to construction. So that's why we've kind of separated it out into 2 years. We do the feasibility study, and then if everything goes according to plan, we do the construction. Whether that happens, whether we really do end up doing the middle school 1 year and Chatham the year after, or if we do some other, configuration, it will really depend on feedback we get from the MSBA. It is a competitive program, so if we don't get in the first year, it might end up going further out. And our own evaluation of those roofs to see where we think the greatest need is and how we want to manage that expenditure. So as I mentioned, these are the sorts of items which were previously presented as part of the capital plan. They're still there, they're just presented as a sort of capital improvement, extraordinary maintenance plan. So I'm pleased that we're still, we're investing money at the middle school, trying to replace some of the carpets, putting tiles in, which are easier to clean in a more pleasant environment. The building control system, so there's things like, that helps manage things like lighting and HVAC here at the high school, needs to be updated, as do security cameras here and at Chatham. We're starting, it's just the beginning of a district-wide, Chatham, Harwich and the middle school process to replace smoke alarms. It's not urgent, but we just want to start the process now. We'll do it over the next few years so that we can get them replaced. And every year we budget to put $50,000 into a stabilization fund, which is for unexpected costs that arise if we have related to facilities or other needs. So we plan to put another $50,000 in there. I think it's got like 130,000 in it right now. So this would push that up a little. So there are other needs which have been raised, other items that have been raised as possible need by principals that are not in the budget. At the moment, we're in a good position in that none of these items are not there because of cost. That might have been a factor, but really they're there because we're not sure that we want to proceed with those at the moment. We have looked at installing doors and team areas at the high school. I'd estimated 8,000. I think some feedback I'm getting is that that's probably a woeful underestimate of what it might cost. So we also think that we're reluctant, it's such a nice building, we're reluctant to make sort of changes to the structure of the building, so we want to investigate other ways of meeting some of the needs, and it's really about having breakout rooms with some privacy, so we want to see if there's other ways to meet that need. We have talked about a district-wide curriculum specialist and an elementary reading position. Those are both, there's both needs that they are kind of related to. We want to make sure that those are the best solutions to those needs. So both those items are kind of under review, particularly around the ELA, because we're already investing a lot of money in ELA curriculum. Has a lot of PD and support with it. So we want to see how that plays out over the next 6 to 12 months before we make any decision about hiring staff. And then the one in the middle there, the ELL teaching position, that was really put on here in a response to caseloads. We think we might be able to live with the number of students we have and with the number of staff, we might be able to modulate those caseloads. So we don't think we need to rush into hiring another position right now. So these are all, items don't come off the list unless we definitely decide they're not there. So right now these will stay on the list, they'll continue to be reviewed, and should we need the funding, then we'll be looking at either future budgets or other grant or other funding for them. But I am pleased that this list, which started, maybe a dozen items, is now down to 4, which is good news. We've really managed to address a lot of the requests. All right, so I've been talking a lot about the expenditure side of things. I'm going to talk a little bit about revenue before we go on to the assessments. So the way the regional agreement is structured is that some items some revenue is kind of taken in as part of the budget and just helps to reduce the budget. So when we have that, the total budget, that's already taken into account revenue from school choice and circuit breaker, and those funds help to reduce our costs. School choice pays for a teaching staff, that pays for salaries, teachers and instructional assistants, and circuit breaker, actually I've said up there, it's fund salaries, but actually circuit breaker helps to fund out of district tuition. So those are already reflected in the budget you see. Grants and the ESSER funding are a little bit different, and they don't really offset existing costs. They help us pay for additional resources, mostly. Especially around Title I, that's helping us pay for additional resources that we might not otherwise have. So it's the expression the federal government uses is supplement, not supplant. So it's not supposed to pay for things we would have anyway. It's supposed to add new things to our budget. And likewise, ESSER, so we're able to hire additional positions that we wouldn't have if it wasn't for the ESSER funds. So those two, they're an important part of the revenue we receive, but it doesn't reduce the budget so much as allow us to buy extra things. So then once the budget's set, once we have the budget, before we calculate the assessments, we take off this revenue. And so that's what I mean about the way the regional agreement is structured. There's some revenue which is taken off as part of the budget, and then some which helps to reduce assessments. So this all helps to reduce assessments. The biggest one by far is the Chapter 70 funding. And these slides are not to scale. I would like them to be to scale, but things would have been too big and things would have been too small if I'd made them all to scale. Because that 4.1 million from Chapter 70, that's by far the biggest ticket item here. And that has gone up this year. I'll show you on the next slide. So that's increased, which helps to reduce the assessments. So that was what we found out last week, and that has helped us reduce assessments. The next item, I'll jump over excess and deficiency for now, but transportation aid, charter school aid, I talked about those a little already. Those are other funding mechanisms from the state. Then excess and deficiency, so that's the funds that we have left over at the end of the year. So this year's excess and deficiency, you'd asked, I can't remember what I said last time, but it's about 1.8 million we have in excess and deficiency at the end of 21, so we had about 1.8 million. We want to use about 800,000 of that to offset next year's budget. So we used the 800 last year, and the 800 is a relatively big number to keep using, so we can't keep using this forever. So I think it makes sense right now, especially as we're going through this transition of the new regional agreement and we're going through this process. But when I'm looking in my 5-year plan, I think we have to reduce excess and deficiency slowly over the next few years so we get it down to a more manageable amount, because it's like a one-off. So it relies on us having money at the end of the year, and that we had 1.8 million last year, but that's not always going to be the case. And then Medicaid, that's for some medical expenses, and then other district revenues, a relatively small part of the revenue. All right, so, and this is all those green boxes, this is those then just with a bit more information. It shows the exact forecast and the change from FY22. Still a forecast, because although we have a budget from the state, it's just the governor's budget, and then it has to go through multiple steps before it's finalised. And the numbers can change. So particularly, Chapter 70 doesn't. Oh well, who knows? They can change. But transportation and charter school are the ones that change the most in my experience so far. But overall, and when I was redoing these slides because it was an update, I wanted to slide this in as an update, but that wouldn't have been true. It was a correction, because I'd summed up on the right-hand side the change from FY22 is actually, in the previous version, it said like 40-something thousand, because that was just not being updated since we updated the rest of the numbers. So it's actually a $310,000 increase on last year's funding. So that's great news, because that helps reduce what the towns have to pay and offsets our increase. So we have an increase of 1.2 million. The towns only have to pay for 900,000 of that, because the rest is coming from that increase in state funding. All right. All right. So this is my really quick summary. So we've calculated the total budget of 42.8 million. We have almost 6 million of that is coming from revenue and state aid, which leaves 36.8 million that have to be paid by the towns. All right. So this is the assessment methodology. So right now we have two assessment methodologies. So the first one, the current method, is that each town is assessed their minimum local contribution. So that's a number that the state sets. The state looks at how much they think we need in our district, looking at all our students and the profile of students, things like special education, low income, ELL, and then they assign a certain amount of money to each of those types of students. They add it all up, and they give us a foundation budget. And then that feeds into another really complicated formula they have for determining how much each town should pay towards that. Once we get that number, we assess that to each town. Each town pays that. Then everything that's left over that on the operating budget is split between the two towns using an average of the foundation enrollment of the last 2 years. So we kind of say, all right, this is what the state thinks you need to pay, and then to get a little bit more towards what we actually need, we're going to look at how many students you have in each town, and that gets added on. And then each town pays a portion of the capital and the debt, also based on a 3-year average, and transportation, which is also based on a 3-year average. But whereas transportation is a 3-year average of the students actually in the district, all those other numbers are an average of the foundation enrollment, which is all the students in the towns, regardless of what schools they go to. So that's the current method, which is basically minimum low contribution, everything else split up based on the number of students. The proposed method, and I mean, I've not spent a lot of time because we have talked about it before, but it's still very confusing. So I apologize, I'm not going into more detail, but I'm sure we'll have lots more opportunities to do that. But again, we start with minimum low contribution. Both towns pay for that. Then each town pays for its elementary school, so the entire budget of its elementary school. Then you do that operating, the bit above the minimum contribution and the elementary schools. What's left gets split up between the two towns based on the foundation enrollment of grades 5 through 12. Then each town pays for its portion of capital as it relates to their school, their elementary school. And then capital for the middle and high school is split up based on grades 5 through 12 enrollment. And then transportation, and that's the same as it currently is based on a current enrollment. So it's basically, it's not that, I mean, it's really, like to get to those numbers is really complicated. But really, it's minimum local contribution, then each elementary school, and then everything else. So whichever version you do, the minimum local contribution is really important. And the minimum local contribution is based on a number of different things, but a key factor is that foundation enrollment figure again. So what these two charts show is the same information. On the left it's for Chatham, and on the right is for Harwich. The bar chart is the required minimum contribution, or the minimum local contribution, that orange bar chart. So you can see, and that's plotted on the left with the dollar values. The blue lines is the foundation enrollment, and that's plotted to the right. So you can see that there's not really a link. There's, the orange bar charts don't really follow the blue line, and that's because it doesn't really matter what those totals are. What matters is what share each town has of the total. So this year, when you go from FY22 to FY23, you can see on Chatham's slide, the blue line goes almost straight. Their foundation enrollment hardly moved. Whereas Harwich's blue line on the right chart, you can see that blue line, it goes down. So relative to each other, so although Chatham's enrollment didn't go up, relative to Harwich's, they now took on a bigger share of the minimum local contribution. I mean, nothing like, Harwich's share, but just year to year, they're now sharing a little bit more, and Harwich is a little down. I think it's a one-off, because I think what it caused it was, and if you look at the enrollment from before COVID, so from 20 to 21, Chatham's enrollment went much lower than Harwich's. And it's kind of come back a little bit. And I think that's because people chose not to put their students into kindergarten and first grade, mostly kindergarten, while they could. If they could hold back a year, they did. Now, they're bringing their students in. And so the enrollment has caught up. Because FY22, although it's straight, it's still lower than FY21 was. This isn't a huge bump. Maybe, I mean, I don't know, I'm not sure, but I think that's probably, so I expect we'll be back to kind of similar levels next year. But this is all leading up. There's a reason I'm going through all this in some detail, because as you'll see, the minimum and low contributions have changed such that it's kind of affecting our assessment numbers. All right. Okay. So this is our assessment calculation using the methodology that's in the regional agreement. So you have the minimum local contribution. Harwich's is 13.6 million, which is 380,000 more than last year. But Chatham's is 4.2, almost 4.3, which is 435,000 more than last year. So it's a bigger number, but it's a much bigger percentage than for Harwich. And it is driven by a few things. So it is driven by the increase in the foundation budget, which has gone up partly because of the Student Opportunity Act. So if you remember, the state passed some legislation, which was then kind of delayed because of COVID, but it increased funding for low-income students and for ELL students. And that's driven up our foundation budget. Likewise, inflation is much higher than it's been in a while. And finally, the growth factor in Chatham, so when the DLS, so the Division of Local Services at the state, determines the growth factor of Chatham's economy, it's gone up at a half faster rate than Harwich's. So all those three things have fed into a bigger foundation budget and a bigger minimum low contribution for Chatham. So what's interesting about this, to anybody else that's still listening? Well, one of the things that's interesting about this is this doesn't increase how much money we get. It doesn't increase, our budget. It just changes the share. So our budget's set. The amount of the assessment would not change. It's just the share of the assessment between Harwich and Chatham. So all those numbers. So it's funny because the state increases our foundation budget. It says, oh, you need a lot more money. They don't give us any more money. It just more money has to come from the towns. That's not true. They give us a little bit more money, but not as much as they increased our requirements. It just shifts that distinction between Harwich and Chatham. All right, so the operating assessment, that's everything above. It still increases more for Harwich and Chatham. And this is because, I'm sorry, I'm probably going into too much detail, but foundation enrollment for the state is based on, so it's FY23 budget, but it's based on FY22's enrollment. But when we do the 3-year average, just because of the way the regional agreement works, it's based on FY19, 20, and 21. There's a year lag, so it's not the same numbers. So next year, we'll have, when we're doing this, that uptick for Chatham will now be included in numbers, but it will be modulated because it's 3 years. Because next year, when we're doing FY24's budget, we'll be looking at 20, 21, and 22. And then so you're always, the state's calculations are using enrollment 1 year ahead of ours. I know. So it's a head scratcher. So, all right. Yeah. Okay, so and then capital, both are down, but both are down because I've changed what we count as capital. So it doesn't really make any difference to the towns because it's still split up using the 3-year foundation enrollment, which is what it would be if it was part of capital. Now it's just done at a different part in the calculation. And then debt, which I mentioned before, and that's just those debt schedule payments. So one thing that's interesting when we start to think about our 5-year plan, so maybe we'll start to think, well, let's not capture those savings, but let's put them into paying off the debt for the middle school roof. And so we'll be able to use some of those funds to offset other costs. It's like some debt rolls off, we roll it onto another project. And so that amounts to a 2.5% increase for Harwich. It's just shy of $700,000, and almost $250,000 increase to Chatham, which is 2.9%. So it's still not a huge increase for Chatham, but as a percentage, it's more than they've been getting in recent years. And it really, because I'm really laboring the point, I know, because when we presented all this, what might happen with the regional agreement, when we presented it last year, we presented kind of a different picture, but that was partly because of how the foundation enrollment has changed this year. I'm getting my excuses in now before I show you the next slide. All right. So this is the assessment using the proposed method that's in the regional agreement changes that are being proposed. So the minimum local contribution, that number doesn't change. But then the operated assessment does change. Because now, before, in the previous version, the elementary schools budgets are split essentially 75-25 almost. 75% is paid by Harwich, 25% is paid by Chatham. That's in the original methodology. In this new method, each town pays for its own elementary school. So Chatham pays for 100% of Chatham's elementary school, and Harwich pays for 100% of Harwich's elementary school. Chatham's budget is more than 25% of the elementary school budget. And so that's why Chatham's budget increases. Then everything else is split up based on the grade 5 through 12 change. Transportation, I should have mentioned, transportation has gone down a little bit because way back a few slides ago, we increased transportation aid went up. So we have more money coming in from the state to offset transportation costs. And so that helps to reduce those budgets. Capital and debt. Capital actually is different because each town is now just paying for its own capital. And so the Chatham Elementary School roof is now part of Chatham's budget. The way I've changed how we categorize capital doesn't really make much difference to this. Like I played it out in different, it made like $3 difference or something like that, because Chatham's, so if we call it capital, all that stuff will be in the capital line, and it's split out based on a 3-year foundation enrollment, or a 5. No, I tell you what, in this version, if we put all the money in capital, Chatham pays for it because it's part of their capital. If we put it back into the operating budget, Chatham's still paying for it because it's still part of the elementary school's operating budget. So the things in the capital line are the two elementary, the two roofs, the middle school and Chatham, and the stabilization payment. And then debt is unchanged. And that should be the end. So we are open for questions or comments that anybody might have. Okay.
But it being the public hearing portion of our meeting, this public comment is for the community members. So if there's anyone out there that would like to make a public comment related directly to the budget. I think. Yeah.
ESSER fund related?
ESSER fund related. Should we do this public comment or wait till?
We have it on our regular.
We have ESSER funds on the agenda. Is that okay to just hold? Thank you. Okay. Mr. Gruska?
Thank you. I have a couple of comments, and then I have 4 questions through you, Madam Chair, to the administration. First, my comments to all of you. I just want to say kudos to both the administration and school committee for the transparency in this budget process. I've observed dozens of school budget processes in my lifetime. This was by far the most transparent process I've ever seen. I commend you for the school committee budget workshop the administration put on for the school committee. I think this school committee is probably more informed going into discussing and passing a budget than any school committee I've ever seen because of all the information that's been provided, because of the direct access that you had to the principals and directors themselves being able to explain their needs directly to you. I've never seen that before. Perhaps some of you have in other school systems. I haven't, never experienced it myself. So I think that's tremendous and a lot of good news in this budget, thanks to things like the increased state aid, the Chapter 70 aid, the reductions in our charter tuitions and our school choice tuitions. Kudos to, and I think that's directly related to a strong budget and other factors. I have some questions, and I don't know whether I should list all of the questions for response or take them one at a time, whatever you prefer, Madam Chair.
What would you prefer?
Let's one at a time.
One at a
Okay.
time?
Very good. With regard to, in the budget, it looks like $340,000 of ESSER funds going into the budget. So, if there wasn't those ESSER funds, which are unique because of COVID, how much would we have to be adding to the budget? How much larger would our budget have to be to fund all of the needs that are funded in the budget that was presented tonight? And I asked that question because there's another presentation coming up at the regular meeting, but I see a number of different figures always given, but I see 340,000, and I assume that that's funding both positions and other needs that would have to be added to the school budget and therefore the assessments to have those same staffs and services if we didn't have those particular one-time or short-term federal funds.
So I can answer that question. So the $340,000 just is partly historical practice, but that's only the salaries that are currently planned out of ESSER for next year. So it's just salaries. The other items which are not reflected in the budget because it's just those salaries are already, those contracts for employment are already in place, so they're captured, but they're being offset by ESSER funds. Whereas purchases of supplies and materials and even contracted services, they've not been set yet. So, and even if they were, we have much more flexibility beginning out of those sorts of purchases. So we don't include them in the budget. We just include salaries, in terms of being offset by ESSER funds. I mean, I don't know, in some ways it's an easy question, in some ways it's a difficult question. So if we didn't receive those ESSER funds, we would be having a discussion about whether or not we should be increasing the budget in order to use those things. I don't know if it would be definite. I mean, the easy answer is, well, it would take $340,000 to pay for those salaries, so that's how much more we'd need from the budget. I don't know if we would, if that meant other items, if that meant, that would then be a discussion we'd be having with the towns about whether or not we could afford that. ESSER has given us this great opportunity to tackle some of the needs that have been identified, in part because of, or largely because of COVID. And so we're grasping that opportunity. It would definitely be a different discussion if all those funds had to come from the budget.
That was the point I'm trying to get at. When is the time limit for these federal funds? How much more time do we have to anticipate that before we have to look at going back and adding into the future school budgets to meet those needs?
Yeah, so that's 2024. So September of 24. So that'd be FY25 when we'd have to have a budget which didn't have ESSER funds.
A great note was that the reduction in health insurance, the increased aid, the reduction in the assessments for charter and school choice enabled many of the items that weren't in the budget in the first iteration of the proposed budget this year are now able to be funded. There's still a few items, as you said, under consideration. Would any of those items qualify under these federal ESSER funds if it was decided that they were important to have?
I think they could if we decided that that's how we want to spend the money. But I would, I just come back to that caution, like every time we add a position, we have to have a plan for it in 3 years' time, because otherwise that's somebody's job is being cut in 3 years' time unless we can find the funds. So does that mean, every time we add a position, that's added onto the budget, is added onto assessments down the line, and, we do have a challenge. We have needs that we will need to meet, but our enrollment is going down, so we have to balance meeting those needs with justifying adding a lot more staff while enrollment is going down.
Yeah, excellent point.
Sure.
And that's what's going through my mind is, when you say most of these funds are being used for staffing,
That's my fault.
if that staffing had to be continued.
Mr. Gruska.
It would be a challenge down the road.
Mr. Gruska, would you mind if we held any more ESSER questions until after we hear the report
Madam Chair?
Yes.
in the regular meeting?
Yes,
Madam
I
Chair.
tried to relate them into the budget and what the impact would have been on this budget and future budget. I will. The next question was talking about the enrollment trends and the expectation that it's going to return to the previous trend. I'm wondering more what that means. That means a leveling off of enrollment. A previous trend was that enrollment was dropping more significantly in Chatham than it was in Harwich. Is that the return that we're expecting? What do we expect with regard to the relative enrollments?
I think it's really hard to tell. I think enrollment will continue to drop, and sometimes I don't know. It's hard to tell. I think it will be a little faster at Chatham. It depends. It varies because it depends where, what the enrollment breakdown is up at other grades, because as other grades progress through the school, as other classes progress through the school and age out, then that changes the enrollment. So it depends a little bit on the makeup of those classes, but I do think, and sometimes it's lower, Chatham's will fall a bit lower than Harwich's. So I'm prevaricating. I'm not giving you a straight answer because I'm not sure there is one at the moment.
I would assume you're estimating based on enrollment projection data from the NESDEC, et cetera. Another question on the items on the capital plan, the big the roofing, the boilers, et cetera. Are those figures in your charts the total estimated figures, or are those figures minus any MSBA assistance?
They are. I have put in just the net cost, so they reflect MSBA funding. So the full cost would be more.
Okay. And final question. Thank you. Charter school reimbursement. Could you explain a little bit more on how that works? How much, roughly and percentage-wise, of the tuition that we pay out do we get back in charter school reimbursement?
Let me just tell. Let's see. So, wait for it. It's about 10%, maybe. So 140. Yeah, about 10%. Yeah. At 10%.
About 90% of what we pay out for charter school tuitions is strict payout. We only get about 10%
Yes.
of that back.
Yep.
That ends my questions. Extremely clear, understandable presentation, and a lot of good news in it based on new information that's come down in the last couple of weeks. Thank you so much, and thank you to the committee for allowing questions from the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gruska. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to make a comment?
Madam Chair, I just have a clarification. Since this is a public forum, I believe there's another ESSER question in the audience. It might be answered on the agenda, it might not, because once we get into our agenda, we won't have an opportunity for questions from the public. So I just want to make sure if there's a member of the public that has a question. Does that make sense? Because once we enter into our regular agenda, the public won't be able to ask their questions.
Don't we still have the public comment section then?
We do at the beginning, but we can't get into a Q&A.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, so I apologize, Mrs. Weatherup, but would you like to join us at the microphone? Okay.
Madam Chair, is it a question or a comment?
Oh,
Is it a question about the budget, or is it more of a public comment regarding ESSER funds? That would be my
It's more
only.
of a comment regarding.
Okay, then I think, then that can wait probably. I just thought it was questions, yeah.
so I guess that is.
So it
gonna
will wait.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but just about a
Sorry
minute,
about
so
that.
we could even just stretch your
I
legs a
didn't
little
think
bit.
it up a while.
Yeah.
And we'll see again.
We can find you.
Pay your fare.
Just jump up and down, raise your hand, and maybe you'll see.
Yeah. Okay, so if I don't see any other community members with public comment, then we will move to adjourn the public hearing portion of our meeting.
Move to adjourn the public hearing.
Roll call vote. Ms. Stout?
Aye.
Ms. Tolley?
Aye.
Ms. Games?
Aye.
Ms. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Scott?
Aye.
Mr. Russell? Aye. And Ms. Zebrat Long? Aye. And I am an aye. So that adjourns our public hearing on our FY23 budget. So now we will move at 7 o'clock PM. We will now move into our regular school committee meeting that we need to roll call into.
Call to
So,
order.
Ms. Stout,
Present?
Ms. Tolley,
Present.
Ms. Games.
Present.
Ms. Rogers.
Present.
Ms. Scott.
Present.
Mr. Russell.
Present.
Ms. Zebrat Long.
Present.
And I am here at 7:01 PM. Okay.
Now, Mrs. Weber.
Now, Mrs. Weatherup, would you like to join us at the microphone?
We just wanted to see you walk back and forth.
You're getting your steps.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, everyone. I just wanted to tell you that representatives of I'm sorry, I'm Laura Weatherup. I am the president of the Monomoy Regional Education Association. And representatives of all of the MRA's units met with Scott, Michael, and Mark on Monday afternoon to discuss the allocation of the ESSER funds. We had a very productive conversation, and we were very happy to hear that the school committee had approved the majority of the spending to go directly to support student learning as well as their physical and emotional well-being. The decision to spend money on hiring more nurses and school counselors, as well as addressing some of the long overdue capital improvement projects, will go a long way in helping students and staff succeed. We understand that the allocation of these funds can be amended as we move forward. So we would like to go on record that we want the money to continue to go to the services that will directly support students and benefit students. The MREA would also like the committee to consider allocating some of the funds towards supporting the emotional health of the staff. This pandemic has been extremely difficult for students, we know that, but it's been equally difficult for the staff. We are working under conditions like we have never experienced, with increased expectations for managing students' academic skills, curriculum demands, as well as their social and emotional health. Many of us have experienced loss, both at school and in our own personal lives. So right now we are stressed, we are heartbroken, we often don't feel appreciated at all, and we are exhausted. So we just want you to consider all of those things as we move forward. If we don't invest in everyone's emotional health, the academic goals will be very challenging to achieve. So thank you for your time and for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I see anyone else for public comment? Mr. Gruska.
Thank you. Charles Gruska, 6 T-Berry Ave, Harwich. Sorry, I didn't identify myself at the last meeting. When the committee gets to the item on the ESSER funds on tonight's agenda, I have difficulty just from the printout of the report that's going to be given to fully understand what school years we're talking about, utilizing what funds, and I would appreciate very much, I know I won't be able to ask questions now or at that time, but if that could be a little bit made a little more clear as to what school years or fiscal years we're talking about, all these applications of funds in these various categories that we see on the report that will be presented later tonight. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Moving on to reports and discussion. Our first item on our agenda is the FY23 budget hearing follow-up. So I don't think that we need Mr. McMillan to represent, but I'm wondering if we have any questions or comments amongst ourselves. Ms. Tolley?
Thank you. Thank you for a really clear, great presentation. That was really easy to understand, and I know we've been privy to hearing this information many times, so maybe it's, seventh time's a charm. I'm really getting it, but I appreciate the presentation. I do have several questions, and would you like me to ask them one at a time?
Sure.
Okay. When will the guidance and psychology staff review happen?
So that's ongoing at the moment, and we should have a decision within the next month or so.
Okay, and what will the implications of that decision?
It's really just, to be honest, it's just about staffing in the individual buildings and making sure we've got the right ratios of staff to students.
Okay, I'm wondering if that, the results of that review would inspire or lead to any conversation about hiring additional staff for, guidance or psychological staff.
And part of, yes, with the ESSER funds, that will definitely feed into our conversations about ESSER, because I know we have planned a social worker and ESSER with our ESSER funds, so it's definitely all part of what we're considering.
Okay. And then a question about the items that have been requested but remain unfunded. Is it possible for the school committee to receive kind of a live or a fresh list of what those requests are, so we are aware of them?
Yeah, to be honest, all that is right now are those 4 items that are on there.
That's
it? Yeah. I guess there are other items on our capital improvement plan, and I can share an updated version of that as well, but everything that was on the list is now funded, I think. But yeah, the main items that were left that weren't capital improvement were those 4 items.
Okay. And so for them to be considered still under review, does that mean that there's the potential for them to be slotted into the 23's budget still?
No.
Or does that mean they're under review for future budgets?
For future budgets,
Okay.
and potentially ESSER funding if it came to it.
Okay. And apologies if you've explained this before.
Yes.
What percentage of MSBA is covered? Or
So-
what percentage would a MSBA
Yeah,
grant?
so it's based on our low income data for both towns. Well, for both towns, because I think it's done on a regional basis. So it would be, I think, I'm trying to remember, I believe it was around 30% for the high school. And so I would expect it would be somewhere around there. 30% is reimbursed.
Okay. So that figure of $800,000 for a roof, I forget
Yeah.
which one, that's assuming we're paying, that's $800,000 would be 70% of the cost of that project.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So a little over $1 million for a roof.
One other question is, why does Chapter 70 fund increase?
So that's set because, that's related to the foundation budget as well. And it's worth probably doing this. It's a complicated formula. I don't mean it's complicated for you guys to understand. I mean, it's complicated for me to explain well. But essentially, the state sets a certain amount, like I talked about for the minimum local contribution, a certain amount for each type of student. They set a certain amount of budget for that, and then so that gives you a total. So like low-income students, you have a certain amount. Elementary school students, you have a certain amount. Middle school, high school, special education, ELL. That all adds up to the foundation budget, and then the state then calculates how much each town should pay through the minimum local contribution, through the formula that's based on foundation enrollment, their growth rate. There's also a ceiling that the state sets. It's a percentage that they have to be at. But then the state then pays another portion of that. So they kind of set a minimum for the district. They look at how much each town should pay, and then the state pays a portion of what's left.
Okay, so is there reason to believe that Chapter 70 funding increases every year?
Well, so those numbers I talked about, the amount per student, that is set, and they do look at inflation, so it will go up for inflation. Plus the Student Opportunity Act said, the formula for it, the Student Opportunity Act updated the formula for how much they calculate each town should get for special education students and also for low-income students. So they used to say, I'm making up these numbers, but say they used to say it was 2,000 a student. They say now it's 2,500 a student. And so that increased our foundation budget. That doesn't always happen. That's just happened because of the Student Opportunity Act.
Okay.
But it does go up a little bit every year. And then, so it would be worth going, if I could show, I can get the workbook up and show you how it's done. But because it's all based on enrollment, if your enrollment's going down, how much they're expecting to pay you can go down, but they have a hold harmless thing where they keep you at the level you were at the previous year, and then you just get a per pupil increase of like $30 per pupil. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that go in there, but normally it does go up. You just don't know how much it's going to go up.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I was going to say, it goes up, but it generally isn't going up quite as fast as the rest of all your district's costs.
Yeah.
If I look at it over my 20-some years of being an administrator, it always increases. But if you look at the costs of doing business in a school district, those oftentimes are outpacing the rate of Chapter 70.
Jess? Ms. Rogers?
I just had a clarifying question, because I know that the select board this week had asked a couple of questions about the condition of the roof at the elementary school. So the $45,000 feasibility study for the roof is in the capital budget for this year?
Yes.
And then we're currently applying for the Massachusetts School Building Authority funding to cover it, potentially?
Yes, to cover a portion of it, yeah.
But then if we don't get into it, then it would be Chatham?
So it's in the budget for so if we get into the if we get into the MSBA, then we would do the project next year. It would cost, say, like $90,000 or $80,000, and of that, the MSBA would pay $20,000 to $30,000, and we would do the rest. I'm getting those numbers. I'm mixing up those numbers, but you get the idea, right? So it's going to cost $60,000. They're going to pay about $15,000 of it. That is what it would. So we would be paying for the $45,000 for the Chatham Elementary School.
Great.
Now, I guess you bring up a good point. It's like, what if we don't get into the MSBA program, right? And then at that point, it's up to the district to decide, do we go ahead without the MSBA and reimbursement, or do we wait and reapply next year? So the MSBA's advice is apply next year, because you're just ranking all they go out and assess every project. They make a list. So they literally, they make a very long list of all the projects, and they order them in order of need. So they have a level, a bit like we do with our priority list. They prioritize all the projects in the state based on need. They have another column, which is how much they think it's going to cost. Once they get to their budget, they draw a line. Everybody above the line gets in, everybody below the line doesn't make it that year. Okay. And then you go in the next year, you try again. And so their MSBA's advice is apply early, apply often. So just keep applying. And so,
Great.
Sometimes, if your roof's in bad shape, then you're more likely to get in. If it's not so bad, then you're more likely to not make it. So go poke some holes in the roof.
I don't think we need to. I think nature did it.
Yeah, and so we will, and so that's part of that is on ours to make the case. And so we've got a company coming down, to evaluate the roof and tell us and give us information about, how, what the level of need is, and that will feed into our applications to MSB.
Thank you.
I'm going on the roof.
Ms. Stout?
Yeah, so At some point, I want to make a motion about financial thing, but I'm wondering if it wouldn't be helpful, it would be to me, I think, if we could move the finance subcommittee report up to this and do all the things to do with money before we get into these other reports that are going on.
We're not going to be very happy with my finances.
I have a question, Madam Chair. It appears, just maybe building off of Sharon's question, I don't think we're voting on the budget tonight, correct?
We are not.
Okay, so it's not on there. So we've still got a bit of time.
Yep.
Okay.
So we're not voting on the budget tonight. Sure.
All right, well, then I will make my statement anyway, and I won't make it in terms of a motion, but what I mentioned last meeting was that it seems like it's hit us in the face with knowing what our kids are suffering, especially at the high school. I'm not saying they're suffering any less at other schools, but it's just not at the, it doesn't show up in the same way. And now we're hearing from the teachers. And so I mentioned last time that I would really like to see a discrete full-time job for a social worker or some licensed mental health counselor to have a job to do counseling, not helping kids get into college or other types of things that are very busy counselors and school psychologists do in their job. I think it's imperative to at least have one position. I don't know what it would take if it doesn't take what we've already got. So I'm putting that out. Michael heard me last time, but in the budget that he said, well, when he came to the part about the elementary and whatever, he said, this is what Sharon's talking about. And it clearly printed out there that they were talking about the elementary school. Now, I don't want to take something away. If the elementary school or middle school needs something, I'm not talking about having it slide up to the high school. I'm talking about whatever might be being considered now that I'm not aware of, that may be a very big need, is kept. But in addition to whatever that might be, to put a full-time position at the high school for a therapeutic counselor. So I would like that next time we talk about the budget to appear. That's my recommendation or suggestion. Thank you.
Ms. Gaines?
Thank you. I actually share Sharon's concern, and something I'd like to put on the table in this exploration, I guess, if that's maybe what we're thinking about. Adjustment counselor, behavioral coordinator, or specialist, I'll just throw that out there. I do have a question, though, on the insurance, because it was less. What was the difference?
So
Dollar?
the insurance came down about $200,000.
Okay.
So we took $100,000 off the top of the budget, and we used the other $100,000 to get those other priority items.
Okay, thank you. And just for clarity, I know the answer, but I just want to put it out there. So once we vote on a budget, we can lower it, but we can't raise it.
Well, you cannot raise the budget after, well, you can raise the budget, in theory, you can raise the budget right up until, I think up until July 1st. You can't change it, you can't change assessments once the towns have voted for them. But like, so if we voted today, you could vote one budget and next week vote a higher budget. It's not a ratchet.
Okay.
But once you have submitted it to the town, it just gets, well, because you can definitely adjust the budget right up and keep submitting it to the town. I mean, they have to keep approving it, so I mean, you can, like, it gets much less likely that everyone's going to, if you submit one budget and then a week later submit one for 100,000 more, I know the towns might not go for it, so you're going to, you'll run into problems. But I don't believe there's any legal restriction on budget. However, once it's accepted and once town meeting has approved it, you can change it.
Right.
did you want to are you
I was
connecting to that?
Yeah.
Dr.
So,
Carpenter?
so, like, even as we're speaking, we saw that Larry Ballantyne was in the Zoom room, and I know that, that at least one of the town managers was watching the feed, so they have their budget messages that are happening as early as Monday in Harwich, so they're all looking for what's the number that the school district that they need to sort of drop in to make everything balance out as they're doing their presentations, because we're one piece of two other, organizational budgets. So that's, so I think we have to just keep in mind, when we're, if we're moving the budget, what are we, what impact's that having on our partner towns?
Okay.
Can I ask just one quick
Yes, go ahead.
question first? So just for clarity, when we were talking about how things are funded, now that we voted last meeting on the regional preschool, that would come, so like when you were saying, if it goes into the new alternative assessment,
Option 2.
option 2.
Yeah.
So the regional preschool it wouldn't be just 5 to 12, and then that would split based on the regional agreement. It would be the preschool and 5 to 12. Is that correct? Am I making any sense?
So the preschool at Chatham Elementary School?
No, because we voted last time that all of the
Yeah, so there is no-
regional preschool will all be at Harwich
Yeah,
physically.
So that's all part of Harwich's assessment,
even if
because-
there's Chatham
even if there's Chatham children.
children there.
Yeah, and vice versa. If there's Harwich children at Chatham Elementary School for whatever reason, like that's also just in Chatham's budget.
I think just to point out that when we were doing the presentation, what you also might have noticed or not noticed is that budgetarily, it's, if we kind of think of we're able to put, the Chatham, the very few Chatham children in there because there are free seats, so it's essentially a cost neutral thing at preschool to do this. So we're not, we're adding a negligible amount of cost to the cost of running Harwich Elementary School, whereas it was an appreciable amount of cost if we were replicating an entire preschool program at Chatham Elementary School. There'd be an appreciable cost to adding an additional program there, where there's, where we'd have to be adding 2 teachers, 2 teaching
Right.
assistants.
Okay, it kind of makes sense. I was just trying to tease out, like, if we use the new method, town versus regional, but it doesn't, that's, okay. Okay. Ms. Tolley?
So this
And then
actually
Mr. Tech-
follows
Mr.
up on
Russell.
what you were just talking about. So in this situation, the preschool program is integrated. It will be housed at Harwich Elementary School. So that means the cost of running the preschool program is the responsibility of Harwich.
It's in Harwich's budget, yeah.
That's what we.
And as part of their assessment,
So
yeah.
on the flip side, if the entire preschool program were to be housed in the Chatham Elementary School, the cost of running pre-K for Monomoy would be Chatham's responsibility.
Yeah.
Why would Harwich want to take on that responsibility?
Well, so, I mean, and this comes back to the superintendent was saying, as we discussed, so the incremental cost of having the pre-K program at Harwich, having those 4 Chatham or 6 Chatham students come over, doesn't add any teachers. It adds some supplies, but not anything that's going to blow anybody's budget. But it doesn't, if it was a point where you needed to add a classroom, then the argument would be much stronger of just like, well, then just have it at Chatham. If you have to add a classroom, have the classroom at Chatham. If you don't need a classroom, that was why it was, so if you're going to have an extra classroom with all those extra students, then you would have enough students to warrant having a classroom at Chatham. But we're just not, I think that was the idea.
Yeah,
So,
I understand that, but why, couldn't the argument be made then, well, if Harwich wants to decrease its budget, why not just move the whole preschool program over to Chatham?
Well, so I think, well, one thing we're really trying to avoid, and this is one of Desu's real nervousness, is splitting up we should continue to make regional decisions, and we shouldn't change how we educate students to drive assessments, right? We should set a budget and structure a budget that best needs the students where they are and what is the best way to educate them. Then we should calculate assessments. We shouldn't structure how we educate students to influence the assessments. So if the majority of students are in Harwich and it makes sense for Chatham students to come to Harwich to be educated, that's what you should do. And then we should work out the assessments. We shouldn't play around with students and move them. Like this year, let's have them over Chatham to help with Chatham's assessment or Harwich's assessment. Hey, next year, let's move them back because that'll help. Like we want to avoid doing that, and we want to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the students first, and then we'll work out the assessments.
Okay. I understand that. I guess I just want to make sure that that is clear for the public, that that's not really an option to just arbitrarily move the program
Absolutely.
To the other town to
Absolutely.
offset costs. Okay. I had another question, but I forgot it, so.
All right,
Again,
I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere for a while. So.
Danielle, I think I remembered your question.
Oh, Gary. Thank you, Gary.
Here he goes.
I have two quick questions. The first involves the issue that maybe Sharon brought up with the Madam President, Danielle, Tina. What the magic date is regarding when the budget is finalized, you cannot increase it. I've always understood that in a sense. But because we've had no vote, and we're moving towards a vote next week or the week after, during that process, I think, for example, earlier, a half hour ago, Michael said that the leadership team is looking into the potential for some targeted help and guidance in psychologists within the high school based on some need that must be spiriting out. So let's assume in the next week or two or three the budget has been voted and someone decides as a group to come back to us with a plan to target ESSA money for that need. Potentially, I would say that's appropriate. I'm not voting for it, but it's appropriate that would be processed. Thus, that need might be addressed in the next week or two or three or a month, whatever, until finally we vote a final budget. I think that's how the process is. I'm not recommending right now that because at some point, and Michael has said, it's like Title I, at some point, we in 3 years pick up that salary of 1 or 2 or 3 staff to address a need that is immediate, yes. But at some point, multiply that out at $65,000 plus benefits. So you better be prepared for that. So there might be an answer that there really is a need, but we really can't afford it. So, however, I'm really speaking for myself to kind of clarify where we are with the budget. And I probably could be wrong. The other, partially for my own clarity, Danielle, regarding what we voted on regarding the pre-K special needs unique program. It's not really pre-K if we're already youngster. Why wouldn't Howard just move it over there? Well, maybe that would be a thought if both towns had already voted to have both towns take care of their elementary. Then you might see the plot of one town saying, good, that takes care of $300,000. That in this case, Chatham. We're not even there. I don't think that's what you are implying because it's premature, whatever that was. But for example, let's say there is no vote. We stay the same where we are. Whether the program is there or here, Howard would still pick up 70% of the cost of the youngsters, regardless of what town line is. Good, I feel I understand that. Probably that question was not Danielle's, but I tried.
Ms. Tolley?
Well, you reminded me of my question, Terry, so thank you. It was related to what Sharon had brought up and what Tina had mentioned and what Terry was also talking about, is the conversation and the decision around mental health support for students and staff how that could potentially be funded through ESSER. I want to go back to understanding the health insurance savings that we had.
Yeah.
In your presentation, on this page, you list out, this is the update, the
Yeah.
stuff on the right.
Yep.
That was about $100,000
Yeah.
worth of stuff that was now funded out
Yes.
of the savings from
insurance
health
savings.
insurance.
Yeah.
What's happening to that other $100,000 that was saved?
So that just reduced the budget.
That just reduced the budget,
So we
okay.
just, so now we have $100,000 less.
Could it be an option to put it back in the budget and have it fund a mental health professional?
I mean, yeah. So, so we haven't changed the budget, but it does mean the assessments go up for the towns, and so we just need to be prepared to.
Well, I guess
So, I mean-
I'm positing that as an alternative to
Yeah.
ESSER funding. If we build it into the budget now, if there's a consensus that that is an important use of an important resource for our district, we could
Yeah.
potentially seed
So-
that now so that we are building
Yeah.
longevity to fund
And we
that
do
position,
have- we
rather
are
than
so-
rely on ESSER funds.
Yeah, and we are, slightly strained, but we have in the ESSER plan a social worker and $60,000 for, I'm not saying it might not be sufficient, but it's for consultative supporter and mental health. So we are, so there are plans within ESSER to start to tackle some of the issues that are being raised. I mean, even if, so say you wanted to, so just kind of to part of what you were saying, so say we decided we did want to go to that, I mean, you might as well still use ESSER funds for now and still plan for it and just be ready for it. I mean, it's fine to say we're going to hire a position now, which we think we'll need for the long term. ESSER is going to fund it 3 years, and then we'll find the money in the budget in the third year. It's just we have to do that with our eyes wide open. So, and we think, that's manageable, and we can do that. It's A, let's not A, do that too many, because if we have too many positions like that, that will be difficult. And B, don't be surprised when we get there and it's like, oh, this is a 5% increase because we have 3 extra positions that we needed to budget.
Well, I would, I guess, like to echo Sharon's request then, that position be proactively put into the budget, and then we figure out whether it's funded through ESSER or a
So I wonder-
reallocament of assessment.
So I wonder if so I feel like this conversation should not be driven by the budget and by ESSER. I feel like this is a broader conversation about social work, psychiatry, and how we respond to the mental health needs of the students as they're determined by the staff in the district. So I feel like we should come back, or we can talk about it and then talk about whether that affects the budget. But it's like, it's not.
I wonder if we're going to learn more in a few agenda items further along in our social emotional learning update. Wonder if we'll find out some more information to kind of guide more of this conversation. Does that make sense? Okay. Oh, sorry, another way. Dr. Carpenter?
I also just want to let folks know that that on the town side, they were also carrying 6% for health insurance, and so their boards are very well aware that health insurance has come back in, and they may have on the town side used that to go and fill some of the things that they were also hoping for. But Michael and I will inevitably, particularly when we go before Harwich's board, they'll be asking, well, we know you had 6%, went down to 3%. What did you do to it? And inevitably, there's some hope that we've tried to help the assessment come in at a comfortable landing point. Clearly, this year, and I think the important word is if the regional agreement conversation passes at both town meetings, Harwich is in a much better fiscal situation. What Michael and I haven't had a chance to do, given the new number, is to see if the 2% increase on the assessment for Harwich next year is in their wherewithal if the budget or if the regional agreement or warrant article doesn't pass in one or the other town. And that's where we come into, that's where it becomes sort of a catastrophic potential hit to the budget.
Mr. Russell?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, Mr. Russell. Ms. Stout had her hand up. Did you take it down on purpose, or do you still have a question? Oh, you're muted.
I just have a quick comment because the idea of keeping people on and paying for them in the long run. So I don't honestly think we should be driven by that, but if we are concerned about that, then we have counselors in the system right now that are at middle and elementary and even high school that could be retiring. And it could be possible for somebody that took this job to go into that if we didn't have the continued need. I mean, I'm making some assumptions that part of the need is to do with the COVID, because everything increased in mental health problems tremendously with COVID, so I'm hoping that it will change back. There's no guarantee that will happen. It could be some of it could be a trajectory of kids' lives now. I don't know, but there are other ways to structure this that I'd be happy to talk with administration, but not on here, because it just takes up too much time, too many details. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Russell?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Same topic, and the Sub-Finance Committee met for several hours yesterday. I'm a member of it. And this topic never came up thoroughly, and I can appreciate from the president of the association just the sense of workplace stress, and not that we're not aware of that, but yet how does one address that year after year with a tight budget? So the thought again is really for Michael and Scott to ruminate over as this meeting ends. Would be this: a couple of years ago we have had zero stabilization fund monies. The stabilization fund was zeroed out. Up until maybe 4 years ago, we found $50,000, I think, to begin to build that. And the larger you have, many communities have a much larger account to watch out for things that really needed to be addressed without any foreknowledge. Well, in one case, we might have our leaders here think, I think the stabilization fund has $150,000 in it. I wouldn't suggest the whole thing go to something, but a portion of that wouldn't affect an increase in the budget. We'd suffer the decrease. In a sense, one could argue that stabilization money would help stabilize the faculty and all of the staff that they're living through in the form of maybe one staff, maybe not even that. But at least I offer it to say, could we, again, as a committee, to consider in a week or two or three, to cut that by $50,000, to cut it by 100, keep 50 in that we had 3 years to begin with, and address that, not only in good faith, but at least maybe it could create one staff person to address these needs as we go forward.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions about the budget? All right, so moving on to our next agenda item, the regional agreement / budget and warrant articles. Mr. McMillan or Dr. Carpenter?
So Michael and I met virtually with the Board of Selectmen from Chatham and gave them the regional agreement presentation and the budget presentation. I think both were received favorably by them. I think we do have support from their board to have the regional agreement as we have been presenting it here and in Harwich to move forward with their support. I think they were supportive, and I think they appreciated the clarity of Michael's budget presentation. The next step for us is to, we had talked with both towns about the school district, working with the school district's attorney to develop common warrant article language. So we have developed, we've as today had some drafts of that language sent our direction. I'm still trying to understand it. I dropped Michael's presentation into the warrant language and was just sending it back to the lawyer saying, just checking for understanding. Am I dropping the right figures into the appropriate boxes, so to speak? So after we get some clarity there, we'll send this early next week to both towns to have their town council make sure that this warrant language works for them. I do think it would probably be good, Madam Chair, if we maybe convene a meeting that has the chairs of the boards of selectmen, maybe our vice chair as well, so we have that Chatham-Harwich representation, and the town managers and finance directors and Michael and I, to sort of talk about the logistics of the warrant articles and the vote as we're heading towards, towards this. Again, just trying to get everything aligned. We, as part of our finance subcommittee meeting yesterday, I had Mark Terry, the school district's attorney, join us as part of the conversation to talk about sort of the what happens if, sort of the worst case scenario. What if one town doesn't vote the regional agreement, and then our budget is incredibly impacted, or we might not have a viable budget, and then what happens? So so if we come out of town meetings with a non-agreed upon number between Harwich and Chatham, what we were sort of informed of yesterday is it comes back to the school committee to quickly potentially reconsider a budget number, and then there's a special town meeting that's called in both towns, and if there is still not an agreement there is a reconsideration, second reconsideration, and it goes back to a district level meeting. And of course we were asking our attorney, and he was saying that it's been, I think, almost decades since the last time he recalled at least districts he's worked with, and we know that occasionally it does happen, but you'd hope that we never have to get there in this process. So so it is rather important that we find a way to reach common ground in both towns. In a worst case scenario, if we go into town meeting and we don't have an agreed upon budget number between both towns, at the start of the fiscal year, which is July 1, the district has to operate on a 1/12 budget, which is essentially take this year's budget, and every month the towns are providing you 1/12 of the current year's budget. But in Michael's presentation, our budget is going up by $1.2 million overall. So essentially, that would be us as a school district operating on a $1.2 million reduction. And you don't want to get there either, because we're a personnel-heavy organization. That's how schools operate. And you can't reduce $1.2 million without impacting that class size, without impacting program, options and offerings. So, so it's important for us to work things through and ideally be going into town meetings with the support of both finance committees, both select boards on these are numbers that they can support and get the town's people to support. So we'll be working through the draft warrant language, but I do think it would make a lot of sense early on to sort of bring parties together to just make sure we're all on the same page.
Questions, comments? Dolly?
I forget, and apologies if you've explained this already, is there like an outreach plan to get the temperature of voters on this?
Well, I think in part that's what the regional agreement conversations have been with both towns. So, so I anticipate that will continue by both our committee and the two towns. We had a coffee with the superintendent in the last week or so, and let's just say maybe things are going too comfortably because we didn't have the 200 parents that we had at the height of COVID. We had 20 people there, and half of them worked for us or were on the school committee. And and thank goodness that Charles was there, or nobody would have answered questions. And Cindy Gushy, I think, asked some questions. But anyway, it's But I think that outreach is important. But I think just continuing to put stuff out to people, and I think we also have to be ready at town meeting to go stand up and support what these warrant articles mean as well.
As a follow-up to that, I wonder if it might be worth doing some additional outreach beyond these forms. Like, I don't know, can we do polls? Is there, like, could we work with the Chronicle to do some sort of formal, really taking the temperature of voters, rather than people who have the time and the wherewithal to turn into a virtual conversation? I just wonder if they're, I think I feel a little concerned hearing that those forms weren't filled with people. And I feel concerned that there's, I don't want us to get blindsided. Really, I think that's what it comes down to. And so I think getting as much information as we can about how voters are feeling about this is really important. And I guess I'm just opening it up to maybe there's additional ways or methods we might think about trying to get that information.
Scott?
Danielle, I think one of the challenges that we've always faced is that we don't have the attention that I guess the Board of Selectmen and the Select Board have. So I think that's actually something that needs to be initiated by them, because the people who pay attention to us are typically parents. It's nature. And like Scott said, there was nobody, that's what the forum was to be about. That was the headliner of the forum, and there was not very many parents there, let alone community members. So I think the outreach at this point needs to come from the select boards, and us getting on them to say, hey, you need to start having, and they've had conversations. I know that Harwich had a public hearing last month, and I'm pretty sure Chatham had something because they made some comment about it. I must have missed it, but they made a comment at Tuesday's meeting about hearing from people and not hearing from people, encouraging them to have additional outreach, I think is the way that we're going to be able to reach more people. It's my opinion.
And I would say to add to that is the two boards from the board from each town need to communicate with one another directly. I think we've done a good job trying to be the liaison between the two, do all the things, make the steps, facilitate the meetings, having our liaisons try and coordinate that. But it comes a time and a place where they're the ones that are making the larger decision, and then they're the ones that predicate the community. And if they're in support of it, then it's their job to help push that out into their voters on what and why, and ask those questions. And more importantly, back to the two towns need to make sure, one of our worries is what happens if one piece doesn't pass. The two towns need to really be talking about this together, the selectmen. So we had a conversation, about that, about how that needs to happen sooner rather than later, so that we can maybe get a better temperature of what's going on in the community, because they know, they'll be able to tell, I think. So,
Mr. Russell?
Thanks, Madam Chair. To follow up on that, my thought on it, and there's some parallels going back a lot of years, but this is a mixed town electric group here. It's the only one in this particular region. And I think when you hear people talk about a political goal they have, and they say, we've got to get out the vote, but you have to be a voter to speak to other people to vote. So in this case, just the way the numbers have fallen, there's no problem at all worrying that the Howard voters won't say, this seems to be a good deal. Where the challenge is for years, the decrease of elementary children in Chatham schools have presented this as an issue. We've come up with a solution. Not everyone understands it. Most people probably now think, yes, that's the only way we can do it and stay together. So it's really, I think, as we've repeated, the voters from Chatham need to set up a setup by which they poll or encourage the excitement of this, and it begins with, and I think it's a good idea, that Scott get together with our chair and get these 12 people together, finance from the other town and select board members, chairs from both towns, to generate what we're talking about here and target so that, and I know it points to the 4 members from Chatham, that you folks, by making 5 phone calls and 2, to the people that know you and say, oh yeah, for us, Terry and company from ours to go over, I think it would be a negative response. It's just the uniqueness of what we see here. And so I think that has to be done in one start. In the next few weeks might be that group coming together and crystallizing the issue that we have for 4 more or 3 more months. And we from the other town in background just wait that out, and we assist any way we can. So I think that's the best way to try to electrify the Chatham folks that this is the best way for all of us to go.
Thank you all for your comments. And certainly best case scenario is that both towns agree on this revised assessment and we go forward. But I think the elephant in the room is also the potential that Harwich loves and why would they not like the revised assessment? They could say no to the regular budget. And I don't think we're talking enough about that, because that's a possibility. So I just want to put that out there, because that honestly is my concern over on the Harwich side, is the assessment will go through with no problem, and then we're going to have some pushback on the regular budget. And if that doesn't go through, I think we're going to what the superintendent just talked about earlier, about going back to a 1/12 budget. So I don't think we're talking enough about that scenario, and that is a possibility. So I'm just going to say that.
That's something we discussed at the finance subcommittee meeting. We're taking your thunder from your report.
It's fine, I'm like just checking it off.
That's something we talked about, and that's a real concern, that part of getting those 2 boards together to say, this is what happens if. This all looks great, and I understand that there might be some hesitancy in Chatham to approve the amendment. And if this doesn't happen, this is what's going to, so, I mean, it's all in my head, it's just not coming out of my mouth. Harwich's town meeting's first. Harwich passes the amendment, Harwich passes the budget that goes with said amendment. Good, we're done. We get to Chatham, and Chatham doesn't pass it. That's where the 1/12, that's where we would have to either push to try to get an updated budget before July 1st, which would be a time crunch, and it would be up to the select boards to schedule a special town meeting before that date, if it all works out nicely. But that's where I think getting the leadership of the select boards together to say, this is option A. If option A doesn't work in both towns, this is what's going to happen. And this is why we need to start encouraging and sharing the information, and why, because of that very reason.
Any other questions? All right, so we're moving right along to our 2018-2022 strategic plan update.
This is nice, lofty.
Good. Oh, yeah. So good.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, perfect. Good evening, everyone. Mark Smith, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. So, thank you for having me tonight. So, two things. One, I submitted to the committee a detailed report, updating the committee on where we stand, the year 2 update on the strategic plan. It's 32-ish pages. I'm not going to go through all 32 pages. These meetings I'm getting a little long in the tooth. So, but what I am going to do is give you a condensed overview. So my goal was 4 slides. I got to 5 slides. 1 slide is the title slide, though. Okay. We are going to just cover each of the major objectives, and what I tried to do is give you the highlights, the major accomplishments, and then the major next steps. Like I said, for both the public, the detailed report will go up on the website. Will be right there with the strategic plan if it isn't already. So after tonight, it will be up on the website. And many thanks to Joy for helping me with like all the formatting, all the copy editing. I take 0 credit for any of that. And so it will be up on the website, available for the public to see after tonight's meeting as well. As a reminder, we have 4 major strategic objectives. I'm going to go through each of the 4 and hit the highlights. So for strategic objective 1, which talks about expanding community engagement and community partnerships, the major accomplishments for this year is our equity task force moved into its second year. It meets regularly once a month. I chair that team. We have formed a steering committee this year, which has been helpful with me as sort of a structural change this year to help bring in a broader group of voices and help shape the direction. Another big accomplishment for this year, which was supported through initially we used ESSER funding, but then the state actually gave us a different grant, which actually allowed us to use different source of funding, but we ran 2 significant summer programs geared at supporting both social, emotional, and some sort of lost learning piece. I'm not a huge fan of that phrase, but I can't think of a better one. So lost learning. One was focused at the elementary level, which funded camp experience for some of our English learners to build both academic and social language, but also provided targeted tutoring, sort of built right into that day. And then we also ran an extensive summer school program at the high school for credit recovery. We're now one-to-one Chromebooks, K-12. And we augmented several of our communication structures in response to the pandemic. A lot of changes just in the way we communicate with folks. One would be right now having one of our school committee members on Zoom. But lots of changes in the way we communicate with folks in response to the pandemic. The CPC award in Harwich for the Harwich Elementary School playground was a significant award to move that project forward. And then CSL, that's Community Service Learning Teacher at Monomoy Regional Middle School. So for big next steps for this year, some of this stuff's in progress, but because obviously I wanted to get this report to you a little bit earlier. Forming district LPAC, so it's like your special education PAC, but for English learners. The ELE staff, so your English Learner Education Program, that's what ELE stands for. That staff is planning to host a Parent Resource Night. So the idea there is to connect the English learner families with all the other ancillary resources that we have available in the district. Like one example would be sort of like just how to access, oh shoot, I just lost the, somebody who's got an athlete in the district, the portal that you need to get into, like if your kid wants to play. Family ID, thank you. Like how to access those, like things like that, some of the ancillary resources in the district. As you can imagine, COVID has sort of we take a lot of pride in a lot of our community partnerships, a lot of our school-based community partnerships. Some of those had to change, some of those had to pause, some of those, just had to flat out stop. And some of them we've been able to reimagine. Some of them need re-energizing. Some of them need to be restarted. We had plans for expanding different things. So just that whole, as we come out of the backside of COVID and we could bring people back into the buildings the way we used to have them back in the buildings. So that's a big, we definitely want to get back on that path. It's a big part of who we were as Monomoy, who we are as Monomoy. We want to continue that. Part of that were plans that we had for a college mentor program. And then Harts Elementary School playground. So when the CPC grant was awarded, that moved really from a school-based project to a town of, like the town of Harwich took that project over. So it's currently scheduled for March of this March for them to break ground. It got delayed due to, oh my gosh.
COVID?
Supply chain issues.
Oh, that, yeah.
And two, they needed like a stretch of warm weather for the rubberized surface. And then two, we need to have a conversation for the next strategic plan on service learning. Like, do we really want to ground service learning as defining sort of mechanism on who we are as a district? Like, do we really want to expand and make it a defining characteristic on who we are as a district? So that's sort of a piece to move forward potentially in the next strategic plan. The next strategic objective talks about strengthening social emotional learning. I'm going to breeze through this one because you're getting a whole separate presentation on this, but just hitting the highlights. So Melissa will probably talk in more detail about the Zelda Survey, but it's a survey that Melissa brought to us several years ago at this point, partners with DESE, that we do across the district. But even in the midst of the pandemic, we saw some great growth from that survey. SSIS is another survey we do at the elementary level. That showed great growth. Sort of the underlying key piece there is relationships matter. So a lot of the great work that our teachers and staff have done to stay focused on students throughout the pandemic shows in the data. We administered the Youth Risk Behavior Survey this year. Staff and climates. We've developed a staff and climate and culture survey, which has been in the strategic plan as an action item. We just haven't gotten around to it. So it's been developed for spring distribution this year. And then there was a grant, I think it was grant funded. I don't even remember now. But anyways, again, another SEL related project where teachers worked with an outside consultant to develop SEL lessons or develop lessons that had SEL like embedded right in the lessons, and develop a resource bank for teachers, for other teachers, for their colleagues. So next steps in this strategic objective are to now analyze the youth risk behavior data, continue to develop more or expand on that bank of lessons that I was talking about, and then distribute that survey that I was talking about and to analyze the results. Number 3, closing the achievement gap. So that talks about forget exactly how it's worded. It doesn't name implicit bias training specifically. It talks about culturally responsive training. So that's evolved and developed into sort of the next iteration of that is implicit bias training. So we've brought in different ones at different times. So there's been the high schools partnered with Cape Cod Voices. They've done some specific work at faculty meetings. We brought Cape Cod Voices in to do PD when we did our all-staff PD day. It was one of the options staff could avail themselves to. I run training at the middle school. I also did a course on that same day around implicit bias as well. We obviously have the K4 ELA curriculum, which you got that great presentation on last session or the session before, or excuse me, school committee meeting. We've started a great partnership. DI stands for differentiated instruction. Got a great new DI partner at the middle school. She's visited once. We just had a meeting the other day to schedule her next visit. She'll be coming back. The staff's really excited about that partnership. Adam, Principal O'Shea, and Vice Principal Dudley are really excited about that continued work there as well. That's something that's come has sort of been an express need from the teachers there, and then for us to be able, like, for something that they've really been craving as far as professional development, so to be able to have an ongoing partner has been, to be able to sort of make that connection has been great. We have been able to develop a self-paced course for tech that supports instructional innovation. That's actually just about to launch. It launches this month. And then I mentioned that some of these things overlap, but I just previously mentioned the summer program to support social, emotional, and academic language for EL students and the summer credit recovery. And then next steps. So I want to take that implicit bias training and expand it a little bit and develop an asynchronous implicit bias course for teachers, sort of building off some of the things that we've learned from COVID and learning. I want to be able to build an asynchronous course for teachers. We want to expand the DI partnership at MRMS. I actually connected that consultant and had a meeting with Ms. Police here at the high school. She's excited about extending that conversation up to the high school level as well. The strategic plan talks about aligning a district-wide RTI framework, so that work is still left to be done. And then also in the strategic plan is a continued conversation around affordable, both child care and pre-K options within the towns. We know those are two different conversations, right? There's universal pre-K, which is one conversation, and then, which a lot of our family needs, which is like affordable child care options, which as we know are two separate conversations to be had. And last but not least, improved strategic objective 4 talks about improved curriculum instruction and assessment for all learners. So major accomplishments here. We currently have an ongoing working group to establish to reimagine the education evaluation system in Monomoy. So we've been meeting, I can't remember when we started, September or October. It's a great working group. I'm on that team. There's a group of administrators and teachers, and we're working to reimagine what educator evaluation might look like here in Monomoy, so that everybody feels like they're getting some value out of it. We've already surveyed the larger teaching staff and gone through and analyzed that data, and now we're using that to start to reimagine and relook at, to try to make something that people feel is valuable, and people are really getting something from the system, which the survey data is telling us currently people are not getting value from. Scope and sequence documents are completed for all core content areas. We launched the grade 11 civics project, which was a great success last year. It was really kind of piloted meaning it was done across the 11th grade, but it was its first year, and then they sort of made some tweaks and changes to it based upon some student feedback, but it's largely intact with some minor tweaks. I presented to school committee a while back about the Project Lead the Way grant, but this year we launched the Intro to Engineering course and the Gateway courses, which is the 8th grade course, and then each of the buildings has really worked with the teachers to have some great student-centered PLCs, which has been part of which is inside the strategic plan as well. And then moving forward, that group will have some recommendations for educator evaluation revisions that'll have to go back for ratification. There's actually had a meeting before coming to this meeting The high school math department is looking at a textbook adoption. I know we talked about it at the budget workshop. Currently, we're looking at grade 8 algebra, algebra 2, and I also want to look specifically into, we've done the scope and sequence work. So my next focus is going to be at high school unit development in specific areas. In the middle school, the state is piloting this history curriculum it's loaded with professional development. We have a team of 6th and 7th grade teachers that have been going and participating in this. So next year, they will need some time to sort of go back and revisit and spend a little bit more time sort of in year 2 of implementing that new curriculum. And then Project Lead the Way will be into year 2, so it'll be the next sort of year 2 of the engineering course. And then I'd also like to explore, potentially have conversations about looking at Project Lead the Way potentially at the middle school, but that would just be an initial exploration of that. And that is my quick and dirty overview.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Mr. Russell?
Comment, Mark, thanks. A lot of, considering what we've all been through health-wise and pandemic, you put a lot on your table. The thought strikes me, and I just...
And just sorry, this isn't all my work. I'm just summarizing the work that's been done across the district.
Oh, okay, then I won't ask you a question.
So don't be giving me praise.
I thought. No, to get... all of these, half of them I would have to sit down privately and get a hands-on thing. But going back to our new reading program elementary with our 2 principals and how they were so excited with the initial beginning signs of growth, 3 months or so. I wasn't aware that somehow the money coming out of the state allowed us to have a summer camp for lost kids because of pandemic needs. The thought strikes me, and I know I'm at home reading. I mean, you guys are living this. Would it be a possibility next summer with ESSA money or whatever that we would continue to identify those emergency kids? Just the word alone kind of frightens me as a former teacher. And create a summer reading academy. And based on the principals and the reading specialists in each school, if there are, identify as many as one specialist could handle. Hire that specialist in-house for the summer, whatever it would be. Bring those youngsters in with and I realize kids who are 9 years old have a limit. That's a long summer. But with treats and this and that and all the other things, maybe we could enhance that emergency group by 5 less kids. So that's my offering. It's only one little tiny thing, but if in fact to create some sort of summer reading academy for those kids, we might be able to measure a little progress. So that's more of a suggestion.
No, and then it's actually built into our ESSER plans and conversations are both our extended learning opportunities. So we've looked at extending the school day and extending the school year through summer programs. So yes, and a big component of that too has been supporting transportation to ensure that all students can access those programs. So your thinking is very much in line with our thinking.
Ms. Stout? Oh, you're muted.
There's so much here, Mark. I could ask a dozen questions, but the one I will ask is about every 2 years we do the youth behavior risk youth risk behavior survey. And I'm always so proud of Monomoy because it seems as though most other schools are not risking enough to identify that information, which isn't pleasant. And so when was that done? Where can you, email me the results? I would love to see it. Was there a parent meeting?
So I don't know the exact dates on when it was done. It was just done fairly recently, and Melissa might talk about it when she comes up to do her next presentation. I know we have yet to analyze the results, so they have not done a presentation yet. because we're set
Okay.
to do the analysis, and I'm assuming presentations like in the spring. So I know we just got the results back within the last few weeks, so we haven't had the data that long.
Okay, I'm requesting to get the data this week, if possible.
Okay, I'll defer that answer to Melissa when she comes up. 'Cause
Okay, thank you. That's
I was
fine.
just reporting out, yeah.
Any other, Ms. Tolly?
Similarly, in line to what Sharon was asking, I'm curious about the results of the survey about staff climate and culture, and wondering when we could expect to have a presentation on those results.
Yeah, so like I said, we haven't even sent the survey out yet, so.
Yep. So what's the timeline for sending it out, when it's due, how long you think it'll anticipate to analyze the results, and then?
So we have to, so at the last administrators meeting, I got feedback from, so Joy, Ellen Burst and I, who's our HR coordinator, had been working to develop, I brought it to the administrative team for feedback. I have some feedback from the administrative team I have to bring back to Joy and Ellen and I. Then we have to work with the principals to find a time to give it to the staff that, is available time. So basically I have to steal some staff meeting time to have the teachers take it. So within the next month or so, but, principals also have their faculty meetings planned out. So I can't just say it's got to be this date. So I don't know, I can't give you a hard time yet because we have a administrators meeting coming up again Tuesday. So it's going to be on the agenda to talk about finding a time. So within the next month or so, well, actually I won't even say that. Within the next 2 months is probably, I can probably say conservatively we'll be able to distribute it. And then when we get back, there aren't that many questions, so it shouldn't take us a ton of time to analyze it. And then it gives us a baseline to operate from going forward.
Okay, I think that information, along with the results and the analysis of the YRBS data, is really important for the school committee to see, especially as we're moving into our next strategic planning process.
Yep.
Anything else? All right, moving right along. Thank you.
Thank you.
To our social emotional learning update. Welcome, Melissa McGuire.
Good evening. Whoa. Melissa McGuire, Director of Student Services. All right. So I have all the questions in my head that I'm going to answer, even if they're not in the report. I want to stress that the report that you received is 25% of what we do. Okay, so it's a highlight. There's, the more I thought about what we would present in a report, I really have to compartmentalize it because it would have been 100 pages long. So I'm just stressing that. So, oops, am I on the thing? Here we go. Oops, hey, okay. Whoops, oh, don't go there yet. All right. So, here's our agenda for this report, and it's going to be one of my, quick ones, I promise. So we're going to do a little exercise on how everyone's feeling. We're going to talk about the behavioral health umbrella. We're going to talk about the state of mental and behavioral health, and then talk about social emotional learning. So I hope you'll indulge me in this next slide. Oops, in this exercise. So to a lot of people's points, folks are tired, folks are overwhelmed, folks are feeling a lot of different things. Our kids are feeling a lot of different things. And so I ask you to look at the 5 pictures and think about which one are you at the moment. And I would really love if there was anyone who would like to share how they feel right now.
I'll go. Number 4.
Okay. Any reason or just all of those?
It's, overwhelm, of course, taking on quite a bit and can lead to frustration. irritation sometimes if things aren't, going as planned. So I would say 4 is how I'm feeling right now.
Okay. Anyone else?
I'm between a 3 and a 4. I'm just in life in general. It's tense, just listening to everything and taking everything in and balancing all the things in life, which can make you upset or sad or impatient, discouraged, cross, frustrated, irritated, agitated, or uncomfortable.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Mr. Russell?
Comment sharing, rather than 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, as I glance below the sensors, Monday I'm calm. Relaxed, content, and there are moments that strive and string right through the week. Tuesday is more like number 2. And I can't wait tomorrow, Friday. All I need to do is call a sister or brother, and 2 or 3 other things on my mind right now. So that being said, I think it's a sign of the times, as everyone said, and I'm secure and very lucky that I've got a lot of resources.
Ms. Stout?
I hate it when people call me after Terry gives a funny thing like that. Anyway, no, I think that I agree with Tina. I don't fit into all of 4, but there are numbers of 4 that I do fit into. There are numbers of 2 or 3 that I fit into. And because I do counseling, I make myself go into number 1 and do things for that to make that happen. But I don't know when the last time I felt as overwhelmed as I do today. So you caught me at the right day, where it's 4.
All right. Anyone else?
Ms. Dolly?
So generally, I'm a circulating swirl of 2 through 5 on any given day with 2 young kiddos and working full-time and having given birth to my daughter in the middle of the pandemic. It's been a very, very tumultuous for everybody the last couple of years. In this moment, right now, in this meeting, in this chair, I'm a 1.
Wow.
And I think...
Sitting beside me.
Yeah. Honestly, maybe I'm just a nerd, but be able to do one thing and focus and listen to people talk and take in what people are saying and listen for understanding and be in a space with people where we're all working together for a common good and we're all here because we want to be here. We've chosen to be here. I actually feel very grounded this is like my social treat. To be able to, it was very sad. It was very sad. But I will say, it's interesting that I am feeling 1 here when the rest of my life is 2 through 5.
Okay. Anyone else? So the reason I started with this exercise, and in the last week I've facilitated a few trainings for staff in QPR, which I'll talk about later. But I did this exercise, but mind you, I did it with dogs and cats and all these funny animals, is because we need to stop each day and check in with not only ourselves, how we're doing, because that's going to drive what we do that day and how we do that day. But we need to check in with our staff, we need to check in with our students and see, because if I'm at a 5, I'm not going to learn today. I can tell you that. So I need to know somebody to know that and somebody to address that for me. Same for adults, right? We need to check in with each other. So I start with that exercise because now I kind of know how to guide my presentation. So what I really want to look at is, we have all of these things. We talk about social emotional learning, and what I really want to stress is that there's an umbrella, okay? And under this umbrella of what I call behavioral health, you have social emotional learning, you have emotional health, mental health, behavioral health. There's an umbrella, and it's not just one thing, right? It's something that we have to look at in its entirety. So when we're looking at these things, we want to first look at what is the current state. I'm not going to present this to you to alarm anyone. What I'm presenting it as to is because when we get to the point of talking about what we're doing, that's when we have the conversation. But there is a reality to where we are with our mental health. So the first thing I want you to hear, it's short. Oh, actually, can you click on it? Because I can't see. Oh, there it is, my pointer. There it is. I got it. I want you to hear from our kids as a result of COVID. Oh, there's no sound. In Zoom, it says share sound.
It's before, you gotta stop sharing and then do it.
Yep. I thought I was so smart.
Thank you.
Oh, they got it in the Zoom room.
Thank you.
Where's the present? If you click it on the presentation.
Sarah's enjoying it.
In to the right, it says, there's the three dots. It says share audio.
Sorry, I'm like so quick-witted tonight. I want to switch my chair out for that big
Are you irritated, Jackie?
My back is killing me.
Oh,
Can you? Fidgeting.
1 through 5.
yes.
Yeah, it's true. No, but then I'm going to be like sitting down here.
I can hear now.
Oh, good.
You did, whatever you did, it works. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, well, good.
news,
Because we
That's
can't. You got the video. Good for you.
No, this is way more fun.
Just a little technical difficulty.
I know. It's probably still going, yeah.
Because of the restrictions on the Zoom, on the Chromebook, so.
Yep.
Of course, I tried it on mine. Of course, it worked on mine. I mean, thank you for bearing with me. It's an important video because the voices are loud and clear, and I want to make sure we hear the voices. Does it not say share audio?
Share sound.
Yeah.
Think about this.
Oh, I do. You're going to have to do it for me. Let's all take a deep breath.
Ah, feeling calm already.
So you're going to, all right, so I can't do it, right? Oh, hey, ho, go back up.
Hey, oh, I think that's a song. Hey,
Click on that. Oh, to the left. There you go.
Yes.
The number of young people dealing with mental health issues has steadily been on the rise, and the COVID-19 pandemic, as we all know, has only made the situation worse.
If I had to sum up 2020 virtual learning in one word, it would be unmotivating.
Draining. Distressing or anxious. It was a feeling of uncertainty.
We were literally locked in our houses, which made us feel really, really lonely.
The most challenging part of all of this is the lack of social interaction. I hadn't really talked to anyone about my feelings in a really long time.
I have friends that are feeling depressed, isolated, and anxious about the future.
Our life becomes like a constant loop of just schoolwork and boredom.
It was not something I expected to struggle with so much, and yet I did.
We need help for our classmates, our friends, and ourselves.
And students of color and LGBTQ students are especially at risk. Today, youth are more likely to receive mental health care in their school than in any other setting.
This impacts us. This impacts me.
It impacts me.
And me. And me.
If we want to improve the mental health of an entire generation, we have to meet students where they are, in their schools. That's why we're launching the Hopeful Futures campaign, so every student in America has the chance for a happy, healthy, and hopeful future.
That means 1, regular screening to catch challenges early.
access to school counselors and psychologists for students who feel like they need them,
mental health literacy training for teachers and school personnel,
and school community collaboration to build partnerships that help connect services outside of the classroom.
We don't have any time to waste.
Join our movement and give us a chance to pursue hopeful futures. We need your help.
we need resources for our teachers, and we can't do this alone.
We can't do this alone.
We can't do this alone.
So I'm going to put that on hold because I'm going to talk about where we are at with addressing hopeful futures in a moment. Because I want to talk a little bit about how do we get to this place where we have mental health challenges for our kids. Well, one of the pieces we look at, what's called the adverse childhood experiences, that's been around a long time. And what it looks like is, depending on the number of adverse experiences a child has, increases the risk for that child. So there's a variety of ways in which children are exposed to trauma, between violence and abuse and neglect, witnessing violence in home and community, family members attempting or who die by suicide, substance use problems, mental health problems, all of these things. There's an entire list. So when we do the ACEs, there's questions that are asked, and then it gets scored so we can see how prevalent you are in terms of risk for mental health. And what we also know with mental health is that it severely impacts academic gains for students. And so this graph, what this shows you is basically if you have 0 adverse events, okay, or you don't know about them. We have students, 30% who have some problems with academics, okay, that's fair enough. But if you go across this graph, you look at 1 reported adverse event, 54% of our students are experiencing academic struggles. 2 reported adverse events, 71%. So as the adverse events increase, so does the challenge they have in learning. So it's something that we need to pay attention to. Oops, what's happening here? Hey. I get an F for technology tonight. Okay. So, what's happening right now? So, there's an article that was put out by Lori Higgins. I don't know if you all saw it. Dr. Bart Main was also in this article. But what it talked about is prior to the pandemic, we saw an increase in mental health. So this was not new because of the pandemic. It might have been exacerbated by it, but it wasn't new. We already saw an increase in mental health. So in 2019, 1 in 3 high school students and half of all female students reported persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness. It was a 40% increase over figures in 2009. This was prior to the pandemic. And then current situation, which includes the pandemic, the emergency department visits for suicide attempts by adolescent girls in the U.S. was up 51% compared to 2019. Depression and anxiety doubled during the pandemic, with 25% of all youth exhibiting symptoms of depression and 20% exhibiting symptoms of anxiety. It is alarming. We've seen it, we saw it, we actually saw it coming. So really what's important is, what are we doing, right? It's not just harping on these data of, we know that there's a lot of concerns, but what are we doing to address this? So one of the initiatives that we're part of, we were one of 9 school districts in the state that became part of what's called the COIN, the Collaborative Improvement and Innovation Network on School-Based Health Services. The primary goal is to develop comprehensive school mental health systems in schools, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So this is in partnership with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and it's a very robust opportunity to really learn how to build these comprehensive school mental health systems in school. And so what we look at is really this tiered system of support, similar to when we look at response to intervention. There's always tiered systems of support, right? We have to do the same thing with mental health, is we have to look at what are the tiered levels of system that we're able to provide across our schools. And on the outside, really making sure that we're addressing all of these other pieces, cultural responsiveness and, looking at our finances. And we talked about this earlier, and I'll kind of talk about the positions to answer questions. advocacy and policy. We are heading to, myself and Sherry Armstrong, we're heading to Washington in March to present policy to our legislators that have to do with education, have to do with mental health, have to do with early childhood, have to do with hiring and retention. So all of those pieces are really important because at some level, we have legislation that pretty much dictates to us what we can do, what we have to do. So it's really important that we're paying attention to the legislation. Really making sure our family partnerships are in place. So all of these pieces are what we need to really focus on in building our comprehensive school mental health system. I wanted to share our team for COIN, and I'm very grateful and blessed for the folks that work on this team and another team I'll talk about in a moment. We meet quite frequently, and we look at all of the goals that we have set for ourselves through COIN, which I will share next. But we have Holly Tavano, we have Jillian Scaficcio, we have Robin Titus, and we have Andrew Matheson, and myself on this team. And one of the first things that we did was, which is part of this particular grant that we are part of, is we did what's called the SHAPE, which is a School Health Assessment and Performance Evaluation System. In your packets, I believe I gave you our initial assessment. The assessment is pretty detailed, and I do want to share it with you. There's no audio, so we don't have to worry about that. But I do want to show you what we gained from this. Again, not my computer, so let's see. Because this is really important, being able to be part of this system here. Our assessment covered many domains. I'm not saving anything. Okay. So when we did this assessment, as you can see, there's a whole needs assessment, there's screening, there's mental health promotion services and supports, early intervention and treatment, funding and stability. This is all part of the work that we're doing to really assess what our mental health needs are under that whole behavioral health. And one of the pieces that's really exciting about this is, of course, it gives you a summary report, and it tells you kind of where we land in terms of what are some things that we've mastered, what are we progressing in, what's emerging. So we took that, and it breaks it down even further into each of those categories. And we decided that teaming was going to be our focus, hence the team that we have with COIN, so that we can begin to foster that understanding of what our needs are and then be able to support our schools and our staff in developing the system. So the only other exciting thing I want to show you about this, let me get rid of this. One of the really critical pieces to developing a comprehensive mental health system is early screening. We currently don't have a mental health early screener. We're amazing in our social emotional learning. We do outstanding, and I'll talk about those screeners, but we don't have screeners to really identify early, is a student susceptible or at risk for a mental health? So what we did is, right here with these focus areas, you can choose any of these screening areas. We chose global, and what we did is looked at, now these are all research-based and evidence-based screeners that are used in the mental health systems, and what we decided to do is look at each of these and have at least a pilot. So we're going to pilot this particular screener, which is a strengths-based and difficulty-based questionnaire. And it really covers a whole host, if you notice on the focus areas, anxiety, depression, disruptive behavior, global functioning, hyperactivity, social skills. And it'll give us a nice baseline with students to see where they're at. And this is free, right? So it's also about how do you harness your resources in a way that you can be effective and efficient and get the information you need. So that is one of the pieces that we are working on through COIN, and through a lot of professional development and consultation from experts in the field. So the other activities that we're doing is through COIN. Each month we have to submit what's called a PDSA, which is a Plan, Do, Study, and Act. So what we've done over the past few months is one of our PDSAs was to complete the shape and then look at that and just start to determine what do we need to do with that. From that, we decided we were going to host a mental health community forum, which we did, and then we were going to pilot this particular screener. And the last one is to form a behavioral health committee that will help us to really take a deeper dive at our SHAPE assessment and start to create some strategic benchmarks in developing our mental health systems. So for screening, so as I said before, we do an amazing job with screening our students in the larger realm of social emotional learning and some other areas that are required. So like for the SBIRT, that's really the substance use screener that we do once a year, and that's only done at 2 grades, and we will be administering that this spring. We do certainly at the elementary level, as Mark said, we do the SSIS, which is a social skills improvement system. And with that also, there is some curriculum that we use in the elementary schools. But they do that for all levels so that they can get a baseline. And then there's another one, it's called SSA, which is a social skills assessment for kids who kind of were red flagged on this initial one so that they can develop specific social skills goals. We do the relationship survey once a year, so that's asking all the students if they have trusted adults in the buildings and who those adults are. We also, at the high school level, we do SOS, which is signs of suicide, and that's also a screener. So that is also giving us an indication of where students are in the moment in terms of their own mental wellness. As Mark said, we just finished the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and we will be doing a deep analysis of that. And then we also do, similar to what I did with you folks earlier, we have the zones of regulation. So kids are kind of doing that check-in in the morning and deciding, what zone are they in? Am I in blue? Am I in green? Am I yellow? So that we have a good sense of where kids are at. And then, of course, there's the VOCAL, which is the Views of Climate and Learning Survey Project. That actually comes right at the end of MCAS for grades 4, 5, all right, I can't remember off the top of my head, 4 grades. And that really is giving you, information about bullying, about how they feel they're treated in their school environment. So it's different information than the CELIS, which I'll talk about next. So our CELIS, which is administered twice a year, it's a social emotional learning indicator system. We are going into year 5 of this. It's been an incredible journey with this particular tool in partnership with DESE, because now, and Monomoy was the first in the state to actually fully implement this system, and it's now part of grants that other districts are able to apply for to be able to use this tool, get consultation. We are consultants. When I say we, it's me, but that's okay, to this particular tool. So what I want to show you with this tool is that the questions that are asked are very specific to the 5 core competencies of social emotional learning. And I know every year I show you the wheel. The wheel's in one of my slides. But it really looks at, self-assessment, self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, social skills, and relationship skills. So all of those color-coded little boxes to the right, those are the answers that the student gave. So it comes out in a really nice grid that shows us where the students feel they are for each of those questions. And I gave just an example of a question. So under relationship skills, RSK2, okay, if you can see that. RSK2 is way up here, up in the left-hand corner. Okay, so that's talking to an adult when I have a problem at school. Well, that student answered 3, that student said, really easy for me to do that. That is awesome. And so we can go down along each of these and really get an idea of those are what strengths a student has that they feel they have. And then down in this right-hand corner, these are things that were really hard, okay? So everything is color-coded, and what's beautiful this year, and I got so excited, is when we get these maps now, you can hover your cursor over any of those and the question pops up automatically. So you don't have to toggle. I think I actually gave you all the questions in your packet so you could see the scope of questions that are asked. But now you don't have to. We used to have to go back and forth. What was that question? And so we've really refined it so that we can easily pull up a student's map, especially if they're having a difficult time, and look to see, well, where does that kid feel he falls within some of these social emotional learning skills? So this has been an awesome tool, and we continue to work on ways in which we'll use those data and how we'll start to begin to train more people to use this as a way to support students. And of course, I have to always bring up our little wheel and our focus on social emotional learning. What they did with this recently, they've adapted, and they keep adapting it over the years, but those outer circles, they actually broke down specifically, there used to be just 3. What they did is they broke out communities and then families and caregivers, so that we're looking at what are the resources around each of those circles that we need to be able to use to support our students, and also making sure that the community is involved in any of the social emotional learning and behavioral health needs of our students. Oh, where's that stuck? I don't know. So what's some of the curriculum we're using as a result of our social emotional learning? Well, pre-K through 3, we have Second Step. And I think in the report I may have given a breakdown of the kind of categories of lessons that are provided. We also have the zones of regulation in both of our elementary schools. And then in grades 3 through 12, we use BOTFIN life skills training, which also satisfies our substance use mandate for curriculum, as well as the social emotional learning curriculum. The Second Step also satisfies our bullying prevention curriculum that we're required to implement as well. And again, this is not the only curriculum, but this is highlighting our curriculum. The other group that we've been a part of for 4 years, which we were very blessed to be part of through a grant, was the EXCEL, which is the Excellence Through Social Emotional Learning Network. So we were one of the first districts, again, that were chosen to participate in the initial network in 2017. And 9 districts out of the whole state of 39 folks that applied. This has been tremendous because this is what's built our capacity to really look at how do we begin to integrate social emotional learning across our students' educational program. So I did want to share we've had a lot of folks that have participated over the past the 4 years that we were with EXCEL. And by the way, EXCEL was supported through the Rennie Center and Transforming Education. We met frequently. There was a lot of professional development. And then from there, when Mark talked about, we had a consultant from Transforming Ed who worked with all our instructional leaders. And I purposely wanted to put their work in your packet so you could actually see how they develop some of those lesson plans that can be integrated into any subject across a student's educational program. So we currently have a really nice team. My picture's not up there, I'm covered, but I'm standing here, so I didn't think I needed to put my picture, but I really felt like it was important to see people's faces. So these folks are working really, really hard, and I'm going to actually show you the work that they're doing because it's tremendous. I'm so proud of this team. I need access to my own folder?
Request that, Melissa.
Can I request it? What happens when I request it? Where does it go, Mark, when I request it to myself? I do. Can you throw me my phone? Because this is so cool. I have to show you. Yeah, come on. I'm going to go back to those numbers. I'm going to tell you what I am. Well, all right. Are we having fun yet?
Yeah. Yes.
You know, all learning should be fun, by the way. I used to, when I taught at the Fitchburg State University to teachers, I say, if you have to get on your head and spin, that's what you do, right? Learning should be fun. All right. Oh, because it's yours. That's why. Open. So now how does it work? All right. So what happens? Do I just do it again? Yay! All right, so let me make this a little, so what they've created, I know that's kind of small, but what we've done is broken down each folder into 5 core competencies. Can I make this bigger? There we go. All right. I don't know what I did, but I made it bigger.
That's great.
Thank you. So what they've done is they've created a folder for all the 5 core competencies, and then we have a whole host of other resources that we've curated, but we will be rolling out soon. So in each one had an assigned folder, and what they did is they created just this beautiful presentation where a teacher can just go to this resource on self-management, and they can toggle through it and find an activity. So here, activities for grounding, self-management party games, SMART goal challenge, and they can just click on this, and it's already made for them. So this has been a massive, massive project. So can you imagine for every one of those core competencies? And this goes on and on, what they've done, and then it gives you the explicit instructions. And then, another whole section on sample lessons. And then there's videos. I think, was this it? Oh, that was fun. That must have been Caroline from the, where is it here? There's links, but there's also videos that show you exactly how to implement the lesson. So they've done just an amazing, amazing amount of work. So our goal for this year is to really have it prepared for staff so that we can roll that out and share it. We don't want to overwhelm staff. One of the things we've always said is that we don't want social emotional learning to be something else. It's part and parcel. It's the fabric of teaching and learning, right? So that we want to make sure they're not overwhelmed by it, but they're using it in a way that's fluid and supportive for the work that the teaching that they're doing. And then finally, we've got a couple of professional development pieces that support mental and behavioral health. We offer mental health first aid. We offer it to teachers several times a year, and we offer it to parents. I have 3 parent mental health first aid classes scheduled right now, which I'm really excited about, the number of parents that have signed up for it. And then most recently, we've scheduled 6 QPR sessions for our staff in light of some of the crises we've been faced with. So we do have opportunities for additional professional development, not just for our teachers, but for our staff as well. And then finally, and really speaking certainly to Ms. Wetherup's comment, and I agree wholeheartedly, and I will say this tomorrow when I present at the MASC, we need to take care of the adults. If our adults aren't healthy, our adults are going to struggle as well in the classroom. So we need to address that as well. Now the hows, and we have this as a conversation with the Excel network team and the COIN team about, what does that look like? And I don't think we're quite sure, because there's different ways how we can make sure that our adults are taking care of themselves, but we're also taking care of them. So we're trying to figure out what does that look like while we're still doing what we need to do for our kids. So with that is my snapshot. And any questions?
Thank you so much. Do we have any comments or questions? Ms. Stout?
Yes, I am totally impressed. You gave us a very abbreviated thing in our packet, and I would love to have a copy of all of that stuff, including whatever you're doing with Sherry Armstrong and the group. I would look over every single thing of it, and I'm hoping to be at that thing tomorrow that you're doing, and that Martha's Vineyard and a couple other people are doing. This is just so needed. I think it's more important than some of the things we teach, because if we can't function, we can't learn. So thank you so much for you, and if you could pass that on to the rest of your committees, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, and can I, it's not just the committees, that are doing the work, and it's our teachers. Our teachers continue to show up every day and sit in front of our kids, and no matter what. So I'm so, and I have to say, I'm so proud of this high school team over the last few weeks, spending a lot of time with them to just really see the strength, the perseverance that they have is tremendous. It really is. And what they've put in place, the past couple of weeks just amazes me. So can I just say one thing? And so that just kind of goes back to, thinking about hiring people, right? Sometimes it's not about hiring a person. It's about building the capacity, really assessing our resources and ensuring that we're using those effectively, and figuring out what are things that, what person do we need to do something different so that our staff can focus more on our students. And I think that's where that conversation about, the social worker, and I'm just putting that at quotes because it doesn't have to be a social worker, but there's a framework for a person that we need, okay, because we have assessed it. In the moment, I can't say it's a therapist, because for me, it's if we need to build capacity for our staff to understand the students who are in front of them and the strategies and skills that they need to have to support kids, and then making sure that our community and our families have the resources. That's what we're sorely lacking in. So there are pieces that are, it's just not as simple as saying hire a therapist in my assessment. And I certainly am happy to always talk more about what is my assessment of our needs.
Ms. Tully?
I just want to, I guess, clarify and make sure I'm not missing anything. So when you asked that question of, taking care of the adult social and emotional health and well-being, and we know that that's critical, but the big question is the how, what that looks like and how we do it. And that's what I just heard you speaking to. What does that look like? How can we use our resources to actually do that? Is that part of the climate and culture survey that is being put out to staff and teachers?
You'll glean a piece of that, most definitely, from that survey.
Okay. Well, what's the process or the vision or the plan for getting to that how? Specifically for the adults.
Right.
And this, yeah.
Well, you can only get to the hows if you have a really good understanding of the what, right? And so different people need different things to help, for that support. So I think that survey will definitely help us to determine, what are the major parts that folks are struggling with and that we can really focus on supporting staff on. Ms. Weatherup talked about, just the level of exhaustion and all of those pieces, and just feeling that feeling of appreciation and that acknowledgement that we understand that people are in fact overwhelmed. And, are we having those conversations? There's conversations that many of us have, what can I do for you today? What can I take off your plate today? And I'm always thinking about, I talk about effectiveness and efficiency, and I'm always looking at, how can I create more opportunity for people to do what we need them to do, and what can I take away so that they can focus on those things. So I think we need to get to that better understanding of what is going to help, because I'm not going to dictate that. I need to ask each person, what is it that you need?
Yeah.
So we're just not there yet. We just know people are overwhelmed and certainly frustrated, and it's not just work life, it's people's home lives. So we know there's a lot going on there. So I in all honesty, can sit here and say, I don't have the exact answer. It's a partnership with all of our staff and administrators to figure it out.
So the needs assessment, I hear you saying that's the critical piece. That still needs to be.
The
needs assessment is
yes.
the critical piece that still hasn't been fully identified or fleshed out. And so that, where does the conversation go from here then around how does the district conduct that needs assessment?
Well, it's already in plan. It already has a plan. So Tuesday we'll talk more about it, as Mr. Smith said, and we'll create the timeline for that to happen.
Oh, so that I'm sorry, that's what I was feeling confused about and trying
Yep,
to
that
understand.
will-
So
that
that
will
is the
definitely
survey,
glean
that
a
survey
lot of
serves as
inf-
the needs assessment.
Yep, that would
Got
be
it.
very helpful for us to figure
Got
out
it.
what we need to focus on to support
Got
our
it,
staff.
got it. Okay, thanks.
Mr. Russell?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Melissa, great job. You know, we think all of us are adults plus, and we all went to school from, well, first grade. There wasn't kindergarten when I was around, but
Same here.
it was like 8 o'clock to 2 or 3. And look at all the stuff we've learned that we need to share with fellow staff members and kids that we never had when we were kids. Smith Street True Story. On page 31, there's a thing called mental health first aid. I think back to the How Do We Feel Today, those day 1 through 5. We have New York neighbors that come down every few weeks, and they're a little bit younger than we are, and they just, we're not really that close with them, but we chat with them, and they're just a nice neighbor to have. Snow days, I can put a car over there and not have to worry. They swung by about a month ago, dropped in. We were out doing yard work or whatever we were doing, picking up stuff. And the wife said, yeah, glad we're here, because the first we're going to do is go in the house and sit down, and we share a moment of gratitude with each other. Simple, but not easy. So we try doing that, because that's like, to me, an insulin each day for some of those overwhelming characteristics that Monday through Friday invites into our lives, even before pandemic. So it was kind of, sounded easy, but how often we don't do that. That today, how could I visit a gratitude? There's got to be something during my waking day that said, I was grateful for that. And that's kind of, Danielle, your Monday calmness, whatever that Monday was. So that's a skill, to keep our heads above water, and we all can do it. So appreciative to hear this, all good stuff.
Your gratitude, which is awesome, there are a lot of teachers that use gratitude journals. As a matter of fact, it's a ticket to leave in Mary Hemian's class that you need to fill out your gratitude journal. So these are all, as I said, this is 25% of what we're doing, right? I need a whole nother 5 different presentations to really show you, those things, because they are doing a lot. But we continue to build capacity and support our staff so that it's not so overwhelming for them, right? That it is truly making their teaching and students' learning easier. So when they're answering that SELLIS question, about what's so difficult, we want to build those to they're not as difficult as they were yesterday or last year or whatever.
Ms. Rogers?
I just wanted to say, when we all switched over to remote learning, that zones to regulation at the beginning of every day was really helpful for my children. It was great to gauge how they were doing that day and just explore a little bit further. It was a great way to just kind of start the day off on the right foot. So that was fantastic, and I'm glad that that's still happening. And then also, great job finding the SHAPE program where you could assess where people are. That was really neat to see. And I really appreciate that you're looking into how to take care of the adults and the teachers, because they have been a huge part of our students' success. So I'm really happy to hear that.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Melissa.
very much.
All right, moving on. Mr. McMillan, are you going to join us again?
I'm not sharing anything else.
Thank you very much.
Actually, you get the next one.
I know. So, this first, good evening, everybody again.
Good evening.
This first item's just, this was an update on the MSBA Accelerated Repair Program.
Nope.
Oh, no.
Student activities account.
No, hold on. Wrong bit of paper.
Out of order.
That's so funny.
my fault.
Which one? All
All
right. Which one? So student activities, did you say?
Yes.
All right. So one of the processes we've put in place is to review and approve all the student activities that we have in place each year. So legally, we need school committee approval before we set up any student activities, but the state recommends that you also just annually bring all the activities in front of the school committee so you can review them again and give them the thumbs up. So we did do it last year, so I wanted to bring that back. The one thing we have added this year, which wasn't here last year, I don't think, was we've put in kind of a very short objective and funding source summary, and then information on how much money has been, the starting balance of each fund, how much revenue has been to date, expenditures, encumbrances, and the current balance. So just to give you a sense of all the different activities we have and how active they are. So, obviously if there's any questions about the existing funds, existing activities, and then we also wanted to seek your approval for the creation of the activity for the class of 2026. So every graduating class has one eventually. And then also the SHARK project. This is a new student-led group which is around substance abuse and wants to highlight the risks and also provide guidance to where there are local services to provide support for people struggling with substance abuse, personally or in their families. So they would like to set up a student activity to raise funds, both to pay for raising awareness activities, and then also to donate money to local resources. So those are the two, and then any questions about those or any of the student activities listed?
Ms. Rettlong?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the Monomoy Regional School District's existing student activities as listed in the document provided, and to approve the creation of a student activity for the class of 2026 and the student activity account for the SHARK project.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, roll call vote. Ms. Stout?
Aye.
Ms. Tolley?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Love the SHARK project. Aye.
Ms. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Scott?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Ms. Seabrett Long?
Aye.
And I am an aye. Wonderful, moving right
All right.
along.
Thank you very much.
So,
all right, so this one is about the MSBA project?
yes.
Okay, excellent. So, I did talk about this a little bit when I was presenting the school budget, but the Massachusetts School Building Authority have recently opened up the process for receiving applications for their accelerated repair program. They have two programs. One is their core program, which is really about major renovation, addition, or new construction of school buildings. That's the core program. The accelerated repair is for windows, doors, roofs, and boilers, really, those three components of buildings. So at the moment, we're looking to apply to them for roofs at the Chatham and Middle School. The process opened up on January 28th. The applications are due by March 25th, and I provide a bit more information. I don't want to repeat myself, about what the feasibility involves and so on. And then I included this little chart that the MSBA provided for, the whole process of accelerated repair projects. And that's kind of it. So any questions about it? Anything else I can help with? We will be coming back to you in a few weeks to get approval of this statement of interest before we submit it to the MSBA.
Great. Comments, questions? All right. Oh, no? Okay. Moving right along to the ESSER Funds Grant Review.
So, it's me again. Hello. My name's
Hello
Mike.
again. Good evening.
At this point, I'm not even sure. Yeah. I'm not sure I'll ever live that down.
Yeah, oh, feast, sorry.
It's a movable feast.
Sorry.
Mobile buffet.
Whatever.
Touche.
I like buffets.
Food. I'm hungry.
So I had provided an update on the ESSER funds, and I think, I feel like, the comment was raised in the budget, in the public hearing, that it would be helpful to get it timed, and that's definitely something I can put together to break this down as to year by year when we plan to spend the funds. And the update is that, so what's really happened since the last time, this is kind of a refresher and an update. The update is that, Mr. Smith also alluded to it, we recently received another grant for $46,000 for reimbursement of summer programs, and that covered some of the costs we had planned to use ESSER 1 for. So we're now reviewing how to kind of move things around and use those ESSER 1 funds. Partly, I think they'll be used for summer programming this year, and partly, what we'll do is move some of the expenditure that we're currently spending out of ESSER 2, because we can move the expenditure into ESSER 1, and then use up ESSER 1, because we've got a longer timeline on ESSER 2, if that makes sense. So, the state recently approved our ESSER 3 application, so that was good news. So the items that we have listed, they said those are all fine. And although, I keep saying this, that we plan to keep reviewing this and coming back to it as we review our needs, as Ms. McGuire presented, and we've been talking about, with social workers, we can continue to review that and we can make updates. But it is still good to get that ESSER 3 approved, because it gives us a sense, okay, these are the kinds of things that they're approving, so we know kind of where we can go with the funds as we move forward. And then the other great news is, this isn't strictly speaking ESSER funds, but we have gone through the process, and it's Eileen Riley in our office, the school, the accountant, has done an amazing job of submitting an application to MEMA, which is the Massachusetts Emergency Management Authority. So they're the state version of FEMA, and they have crazy, absurdly complicated application process for getting back COVID-related costs. But Eileen has done a sterling job, and we have been approved for $114,000, and hopefully we will receive further funds, and so we will get that money back, and that will essentially that will flow into E&D, that will flow into our excess and deficiency in future years. So that's really good news. So, in broad strokes, we plan to use ESSER funds to continue to fund additional staffing, nursing, and then for math interventionists, reading specialists, summer program that I mentioned, before and after school programs, mental health service support, and custodial repairs and HVAC upgrades. So and then, like I say, we will come back, and I will come back and give a sort of a timeline for expenditure, especially over the next couple of months. It will also help, now that we have the budget set, that also gives us a sense of what things are being covered by the budget, and then what other things we might want to look at for ESSER.
Great. Comments, discussion? Ms. Gaines?
Yeah, I just, we're under ESSER 2, consultative supervision for mental health. Can you just give me a little one-liner? What do you want? Oh, sorry, Melissa.
I'll defer to the expert. I mean, I could tell you, but I think it'd be much better coming from Melissa.
I like the pink.
Melissa McGuire. So what we're looking at, what I've heard from our counseling team, right, which includes guidance and adjustment and psychologists, is there's a level of supervision that under those licenses that's desperately needed, and we don't currently have that. So what we looked at in that particular position is in fact to have that person available for all of our counselors to meet those supervision needs and to provide some consultation to them. They've also become part of, which has been amazing, and again, I didn't talk about in this particular report, but the Mass Mental Health School Counselor Coalition, which I sit on the board for at the state, has created that cohort down here on the Cape that's led by Barbara Dominic, which has been phenomenal. So they meet every month with every counselor on the Cape and Islands to do professional development and really kind of move this work forward that we're doing under this COIN project. So that position would really support our counselors in a much higher level of supervision that they really are asking for.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Is that long?
It's okay. Ms. Tolley?
So the ESSER funding that's going toward that's reimbursed for last summer's program
Yeah.
and the one that's planned for the future. Can you refresh my memory? Is the vision that ultimately we won't offer that summer program, or is it, as Terry suggested earlier, that we would continue to, or use that as like a stopgap to address the emergency level ELA
Yeah, so
needs, or is there a point where we would then start to transition that
Yeah.
program into our regular budget?
So the summer programming that we originally funded was around English language learners. And it was a specific need which had been identified that during COVID and remote learning, the English language learners, especially in elementary schools, had struggled because there was far less social interaction and far less opportunity for them to develop their English language skills. And so the summer program was really nice design for that, because there was a portion of it which was tuition and a portion which was social interaction, and we contracted with the YMCA so those students could attend those programs. So I think that need is still there, so we'll continue to, I don't want to speak out of turn, and this will really depend on the elementary school principals, but I imagine we'll be looking at doing something like that again this summer. But whether or not, that was a specific need. Now whether there are other needs, I don't know, Ms. Smith wants to say about it, but whether there's other needs which are developing and would be well served by summer program, it's not been determined yet.
So what's the last
It has
name?
not been determined yet. We have not definitively decided to do it like that. Not that I'm not saying it's not a great idea, or not that we're thinking about it, but we've not done it.
Mark Smith, Director of Curriculum Instruction Assessment. Yeah, just to add on to that. So Michael's was spot on that it was specific. Also, just one layer to add on, when you looked at the students that were remote versus students that were not remote, it was disproportionate to English learners. So there was one reason for targeting there. And then adding on, we had the credit recovery program at the high school, which was also a specific targeted need for our high school students, right? Because it's obviously credit bearing for graduation. So those were two specific targeted needs. And both programs were successful and criterion based. And so, Michael's talked a lot about putting in programs, and when we're thinking about ESSER funding, like thinking about also budget sustainability. So we're looking at, programs that we're seeing that are sustainable, and that are like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like that we have metrics that are working. So then if these are things that are sustainable and the need continues, then these are things that we want to build towards for long-term budgeting, if the need continues. So we continue to, and it's too early to say right now if we're going to have that same need this summer, but we continue to analyze it as we move forward.
Thank you. Don't go away.
So it's definitely worth, sorry, I don't want to take this tone, but it's definitely worth saying that I know I keep saying, we got to think about what happens after 24. And I do think that's just something we have to bear in mind. It's not a reason not to do things. So I do think we should use, because we're going to use all this ESSER funds anyway, so let's use them. But, so even though we might not have the funds after 24, or that we'll need to put in the budget, let's still do it, but we just need to bear in mind, what's our plan for that time?
Yeah, one other question, might be for Mark, I was trying to grab him. Under 3, a district-wide curriculum and instruction specialist to oversee the district's focus support, $217,153. Is that a salary?
It's 2 years, that's right.
Yeah, it's over multiple years.
And health insurance. Yeah.
So it's 2 years of a salary?
And benefits and,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
And that is, that was one of the items that had been in the budget, and that is still under review, so we're still.
Okay, thank you.
All right, moving right along to our final item under reports and discussion, the DESE changes to COVID testing.
So anytime I think about COVID testing, I go into that number 4 zone that Melissa brought up earlier, where I just feel overwhelmed and everything. And then occasionally, I actually transition to the number 1 zone, and I think it's sort of like one or the other. It all depends on daytime and maybe positionality. So this morning we had pool testing results come in, and I think if you were at Harwich Elementary School and you only had one positive pool, you were doing the happy dance. And Chatham Elementary School is back to having its invisible shield that's covering it from all things COVID. And the high school had a very manageable number of positive pools, and the poor middle school got slammed today. So we were diverting some staff early on. But we're in such a better place today than we were 1 month ago. Because 1 month ago from pretty much today, we were at a place here in Cape Cod and in the schools where I didn't know if we were going to have enough staff to go and remain open. And if we took a random subset of the population and tested, 1 in 5 would have tested positive at the time. And we're at a much better place. So when it looked like it was completely imploding and we weren't going to be able to keep up with it, the state threw out an idea of a new testing regime. And I'm somebody who doesn't necessarily go and look at the latest bright shiny penny and go, oh, we've got to do that. But I wanted to sort of look at things and where we are. And because at the time, what the state was putting out there is, we will give your district access to rapid antigen tests, and every staff member and every student can take one of these tests a week. But the trade-off is we want you to stop all contact tracing and stop doing test and stay. And the thing is, contact tracing and test and stay have worked really well for us. And the nurses and I have been talking that it might make more sense at some point to get to this place. I think one of the things that test and stay was helping us with when everything was extremely crazy and the COVID rates were so high is that we were testing so many people each day, and it was a grind on the nurses, but there were a lot of rapid antigen tests that were happening. And we might not have been picking up a positive that happened because of in-school contact, but we were picking up positives just by the volume of people that were doing test and stay every morning. And what we've seen is, as the COVID rates are coming down and things are, and they have dropped by half from where they were a month ago, there are fewer people who need test and stay and fewer antigen tests happening. And actually, the biggest source of identified positives are calls in from parents and staff members about, my child just tested positive, or I've tested positive, or the doctor, from doctor's appointments. So we're getting more from that. And then each week when we do this weekly surveillance test with pool testing, we're picking up another chunk of positives that were sort of unknown. And a lot of times unknown to the staff member or student, because I think with vaccination, a lot of times a positive test may actually present as very asymptomatic, particularly with kids who have been vaccinated. So we're seeing that there's a lot of benefit in having the surveillance testing, and a little less than, I think, half or so of our staff and students have signed up for this. The families have the option to do that surveillance testing. But I think it's really valuable. So I think we're getting to a point here, and I put something out to our staff today that I think by the time we get through February vacation, and knock on wood, the pool testing continues to show that the new COVID infections are going down, I actually think it might be better to transition to this thing that the state has put out there. Because in the way I look at it is, if we do a good push, and if Joy and I can kind of work up a thing where we send out to families to say, hey, you can sign up. You don't have to be doing pool testing to sign up for this, but we hope that you'll, if you haven't signed up for pool testing, that you'll sign up for pool testing and get this rapid antigen test. That in an ideal scenario, if we wanted to have our schools as safe as they possibly could, I mean, if everyone signed up and said yes, and I don't think everyone's going to sign up and say yes, but if they all did, and everybody tested twice a week, Monday they pool test, Thursday they rapid antigen test, and the rapid antigen test is one that it would go home in your child's backpack, and it would happen at home, and the staff members would be doing this as well. That we'd have, I think, an umbrella of surveillance testing that we would hopefully intervene on the positives before things spread through the school. And I think it might be a good trade-off if we were to go and buy into what Desi is saying, well, no more contact tracing, no more test and stay, because everybody's testing. Ideally, if you get everyone to sign on, everybody's testing, testing twice a week. So I think it might be a good trade-off for us if we continue to see these rates drop down. And we're at a place that at the rate that the positives have been dropping, I suspect that by the time we return from February vacation, we'll be at actually a better place than we were heading into Thanksgiving. So we'll be, I think we're heading in a good direction. So the state has put this out there as an option. It's one of those that we have a joint labor management group that we process every change to testing with, so we'll have a conversation there, but I also wanted to just put it out to the staff to have them at least understand what it is and why a trade-off to say, okay, we won't contact trace anymore and we won't do test and stay, but we're going to try to get as many people as possible in our schools to actually surveillance test twice a week to protect everybody. And that, so that's the new thing. The state has said that if you sign up for it, they'll support it through April vacation. And, I'm cautiously optimistic that by the end of April vacation, if the rates continue to track down and, the vaccinations continue to, more and more people continue to get vaccinated, that we may see the light at the end of the tunnel. It may be, out there, so long as we don't see variant Epsilon come along and, derail us. It's a bit of a wild card, but there does seem to be sort of a light out there, which is a good thing.
Thank you. So can you clarify then, so if we stop doing test and stay, what becomes the protocol then for a child who is identified as a close contact of a positive person?
So the state's got a kind of a flow chart, sort of an updated flow chart on how that would work. Conceptually, for test and stay, the people that we're testing are folks that are identified as in-school close contacts. And, so what the state is saying is that your in-school close contacts are likely not showing up as positive. And that's actually what we are seeing, an occasional in-school close contact now that is positive. But then if you remember, the rate of COVID is so high, are they positive because they were an in-school close contact, or are they positive because of how prevalent it is? So what the state's saying is that bank the nursing testing time and energy on surveillance testing as many people as you possibly can, that would be a better use of the resource than saying, okay, you're a close contact, you should not be in school. But the state would say is if you're an out of school close contact, so let's say, somebody in the household is positive and you're unvaccinated, then you should be, following the quarantine isolation guidelines. So there is a flow chart on the what ifs for the out of school close contacts. And also part of the flow chart is if you are positive yourself. So it's not like that doesn't happen, but there's a level of trust in the honor system when you're sending home, rapid tests and everybody's testing at home, because at the moment it has been the nurses doing all, monitoring a lot of swabbing. But if we kind of shifted to this model, each week we would have, let's say 600 people plus our rapid testing on Thursday. At the moment, our nurses collectively aren't doing 600 rapid tests in test and stay. So we would actually be getting more of a surveillance testing happening through this other approach than what we're doing now, in part because our nurses can only swab so many people so fast.
Any other comments, questions? All right, moving right along to our subcommittees, representatives, and liaison reports. And we'll start off with our finance subcommittee report.
My bang is gone. That's okay. So we met last night. We did have we had a nice brief meeting with Mark Terry, our legal counsel. As a finance committee, we worked on the wording of the warrant articles for each town, Chatham and Harwich, for the town meetings, and those are back on the drawing board right now at this time, with some edits with Dr. Carpenter. And we spoke a lot about the regional agreement and the budget and what the scenarios were if one town votes yes, the other no on various things. And really what it comes down to is if one says yes and one says no, it doesn't matter which one. We can't get to a budget. We run on the 1/12 budget. We run on that till July 1st. Excuse me, as of July 1st, we run on the 1/12 budget. And then we can run on the 1/12 budget till December. And if you still haven't had a resolution by December, DESI then dictates your budget. So, what's going on above my head?
Oh, just somebody cleaning up there.
Oh, okay.
Just a lot of movement above you.
And I mean, some of us are familiar with and some are not on running on a 1/12 budget. We did it in the beginning of COVID. So there's lots of different implications to discuss, and hopefully that doesn't come down to that. And we also talked about bringing the selectmen together and other parties to try and get them to collectively have a conversation about the impact, so that we can get the town meetings to push forward and vote. For the FY23 budget, Michael basically walked us through a preview of the updated budget presentation that he showed you guys tonight, and explanation of any of the changes, so I don't really need to go over that again. It just was a preview of what was tonight. We also talked about the MSBA 2022 Statement of Interest that had just come out. He's also talked about that tonight, reviewing the capital projects, and that Michael will begin preparing the applications for that process. We did a brief review on the ESSER funds, and just again a preview of what he was presenting tonight prior to our school committee meeting. So nothing exciting there.
Okay.
That's about it.
Full meeting.
It was a full meeting.
Yeah.
Questions? All right, moving right along to the legislative liaison and the February 4th legislative breakfast.
So
Ms.
in your
Gates?
packet, thank you. In your packet, which I actually had emailed everybody ahead of time, this will be tomorrow. And I'm especially excited about the 10:30 Mental Health Support Panel. Our very own Melissa McGuire is on the panel, along with Kim Garrison, who is the Behavioral Health Coordinator Research Specialist at Martha's Vineyard Public Schools. We're also going to hear from a couple of Martha's Vineyard students. So if you can go, I know A couple of us are already registered and will be there, but, you know, we would love to have you there. And we also will be breaking out with our legislators, for those of you where this might be new, and you get a chance to ask questions. If you've got some burning questions and desires, we will have our legislators in the breakout rooms. So thank you
Wonderful.
very much, and that will be tomorrow morning.
Great. Question, Ms. Tully?
Yes, can we attend a portion of it? Like, could we log on later and join?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, and that was, thank you for that, because somebody else had asked me the same thing. I would recommend registering, and then you've got the Zoom link, and you can come in whenever you want.
And Ms. Games, I know you've sent it to us a couple times, but maybe if you resend the registration email that you have sent us?
Yes.
Or is it right on there?
Yes, it's right on
Oh,
the-
it's right on there. Never mind.
And if you, and just
Just kidding.
thank you for that. If you do still have the document, all you have to do is open the attachment and click on it, and it'll open it right up.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next on the agenda, we talked about it briefly last time, but it was not on our agenda, that I, as the chairperson, will be appointing Ms. Stout to the CPAC committee as the representative. And Sharon, just so you know, the next meeting is March 22nd. So as the details for that meeting start happening, we'll make sure that you are informed of that. And it is on the website.
It's on the CPAC website right now with the link.
It is on the CPAC website, which is part of our website.
As part of this Student Services website, CPAC has their own website.
Okay.
But an email.
Thank you very much.
Will go out tomorrow.
Okay. All right, moving right along. We put the strategic planning subcommittee update on the agenda. I didn't know if there was an update.
I don't believe there actually is an update. We've had to postpone our meetings the last 2 weeks. So we're still at the step where we need to determine the scope of work that we are looking to have a facilitator for.
Okay, we weren't sure at the agenda meeting, so.
Okay.
All right, great. Moving right along to the superintendent's report.
I'll be fast. I'll do this in reverse order, but in terms of our weekly COVID dashboard, we're tracking in the last week 40 positive new infections in the district, including staff and students. As I mentioned before, Chatham Elementary has the shield of invisibility protecting it, so no cases at Chatham Elementary. We have had 12 cases at Harwich Elementary, 11 students, 1 staff, 14 at the middle school and high school, including 11 students, 3 staff at the middle school, and 12 students, 2 staff at the high school. Recognitions, just really quick. I want to just say publicly, our custodians rock.
Yes.
And, just the amount of snow that we had, and, and just what was required to go and clean up after this storm. So, and I also want to give a shout out to DPW and our 2 towns in public safety, because I was getting phone calls from the police and fire and, regular updates on the status of power to, both, to our schools, but also, to homes and, throughout the community. And DPW had the roadways open and ready for buses. Perhaps, the biggest challenge we had, and I actually think had it not been for some frozen pipes, we probably could have been ready to open. And I think everybody at the same time also just needed a day to go and recover. But we had, for the first time in many years, a rooftop unit at the high school froze up. For those newer to the committee, the last time we had a rooftop unit freeze up, it was a rooftop unit just up above here that when it froze up, it went water through an art room and water through the television studio and the library, and did hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage. We were blessed this time that it was over the athletic trainer's office and locker rooms. We've had ServPro in, and they have, they've dried everything out, and, there's some drywall repair and some ceiling tile repair that'll need to be done, and some minor equipment in the global scheme of things that needs to get replaced, but it was fairly minor there. We also had some heating units at Chatham Elementary that froze up, but because they're sort of located along the windows, when a pipe froze and split, it doesn't do quite the same thing as if you've got the pipe up above you, and so they have gotten those taken care of as well. But I think the Chatham Elementary one, it took a little while longer to notice that it had happened, because power was coming back on, and you sometimes with one of these breaks you don't know that it's an issue until everything starts to thaw. The one here at the high school, unfortunately, right when everybody would have been deep into shoveling us all out, the custodians all had to shift gears to managing a growing flood and find the valves to shut it off to stop it from getting any bigger. But I went around a couple times that day on Sunday to go see the buildings, and there were some snowdrifts that were really interesting. All the snow, it seemed, on the top of Harwich Elementary School seemed to blow off under covered walkways. So there was like 5-foot drifts, and we were reaching out to the town saying, we need a piece of equipment to go deal with this, and and I appreciate that they sent a front end loader, but you weren't going to get a front end loader in under there, and our custodians went in, with just sort of a normal snow blower, and it took a while, but they managed to get things all ready to be open. So a lot of kudos to the custodians for both dealing with the freezes and also just moving a lot of snow.
Great, thank you. Any comments, questions? Wonderful. So we do have another action item, payment of prior year invoices.
Madam Chair, make a motion to approve, because we have to move it first, to approve prior year invoice to Herf Jones in the amount of $261.40, NCS Pearson, Inc., $46, another NCS Pearson, Inc., for $100.80, and a College Board of $800 for a total of $1,208.20.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion, questions? You're off the hook. All right, thank you. Oh, no, roll call vote. We're all good, sorry. Ms. Stout?
Aye.
Ms. Tolley?
Aye.
Ms. Games?
Aye.
Ms. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Scott?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Ms. Zebrat Long?
Aye.
And I am an aye. We have had the presentation of warrants. And our final item on the agenda is I'm looking for a motion to adjourn to executive session.
Keep reading.
After the roll call vote, we will adjourn to executive session pursuant to the MGLC 30A, Section 21A, Paragraph 2, to discuss strategies with respect to contract negotiations with non-union personnel if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the district's bargaining or litigation position, and the chair so declares it.
So moved. Sorry.
That's okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote to adjourn. Miss. Coming out only for adjournment.
Sorry, Meredith.
That's okay. Ms. Stout?
Aye.
Ms. Tolley?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines? Aye. Ms. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Scott?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Ms. Zebrat Long?
Aye.
And I am an aye. Thank you, everyone. At 9:44.